What did you do to my son? Oh God, his head is covered in blood. The furious scream ripped through the Langston estate like a bolt of lightning. Maya Williams' hands trembled as she held Leo tightly in her arms. His small body pressed against her chest, shivering. A fresh stream of blood trickled down the side of his forehead, soaking into her sleeve. Her lips moved in quiet murmurs, trying to soothe the terrified 5-year-old boy. Then came the slam of the door. Richard Langston stormed into the room like a thundercloud in human form. His coat, still damp from the rain, clung to his shoulders. His face, normally poised, collected, powerful, was twisted with raw rage and horror. "You heard him?" he roared, his voice cracking. "What the hell did you do?" Maya gasped and clutched Leo closer. No, sir, please. Listen, he had a moment. He was overstimulated. He ran into the cabinet and hit his head. I tried to stop him, but— "Shut up," Richard shouted, grabbing the nearest chair and hurling it across the room. It shattered against the wall. Maya flinched violently. "You're supposed to protect him," he yelled. "And now look at him. His head, my God." His chest heaved as he looked down at his son, who whimpered softly and turned his face deeper into Maya's arms. Maya's voice quivered, but she kept speaking. "Mr. Langston, please." He was panicking. He started banging his head. I threw myself over him. "I didn't cause this. I stopped it." "Lies," Richard growled. His eyes burned with the helpless fury of a father watching his child bleed. "Get him to the hospital. Now." The head housekeeper rushed in, followed by 2 bodyguards. "Sir, should we?" "Take Leo," Richard snapped, pointing to one of the guards. "Drive straight to St. John's. Call ahead. Full pediatric trauma response." Maya's heart raced, tears threatening to fall. He got agitated. He ran into the cabinet. I stopped him. "That's all. Please, you have to believe me." That was when it happened. Richard's open palm struck her across the face. The sound echoed through the hall like a gunshot. Maya fell to the floor, her cheek immediately swelling, her lip bleeding. Gasps erupted from the staff standing nearby. "You don't get to touch my son again," he spat. Maya's voice cracked. "I didn't hurt him. I didn't." "Save it," one maid sneered. "We all saw the blood. You're done here." She probably snapped, someone else muttered. "Girls like her don't belong here anyway." Maya struggled to sit up, holding her face, tears clouding her vision not from pain, but from disbelief. I swear to God, I didn't hurt him." But no one listened. As the SUV carrying Leo peeled away into the night, Maya sat curled on the cold marble floor, alone, shaking. Hours later, Richard returned, drenched and exhausted, with the hospital report in hand. He paused at the doorway of his study, trying to steady himself. His eyes fell on the security monitor mounted above the desk. He replayed the footage, first at normal speed, then in slow motion. There it was, the truth he had refused to see before. Leo had been pacing, overwhelmed, rocking back and forth. He had slammed his head against the corner of the wardrobe in a frantic moment. Maya had lunged, barely stopping him, holding him back with all her strength. Every movement, every attempt to shield him, had been captured by the camera. Richard's jaw slackened, his fury drained, replaced by a hollow guilt that gnawed at him. The images of Maya cradling his son, murmuring softly, keeping him calm, they contradicted everything he had assumed. And then it hit him. He remembered the night of his wife's death, the accident, how he had thrown himself into work, leaving Leo to grieve alone, how the boy had withdrawn into himself, carrying the invisible weight of loss. A long silence filled the room. Richard sank into his chair, covering his face with one hand. "Oh God," he whispered. Weeks passed. Richard observed quietly, cautiously, from the periphery of his home and Leo's life. He watched as Maya guided Leo through small triumphs. She coaxed him to eat with playful encouragement, read stories to him in calm, soothing tones, and helped him build towers of blocks that he once wouldn't touch. Leo laughed sometimes now, a light, hesitant sound, as Maya made funny voices for the characters in the books she read. Richard saw the gradual transformation. The boy who once flinched at every sudden noise now ran lightly around the playroom, unafraid. The boy who had refused to speak now whispered small sentences to Maya, repeating words she gently encouraged. The patience, care, and unwavering presence of Maya were slowly mending the fracture in his son's world, the fractured foundation of their lives. And through it all, Richard felt something he hadn't expected. His anger had subsided, replaced by a profound admiration. Her courage, her calm strength, her unwavering devotion to a child who had nothing left but fear, it stirred something deep within him. Something tender. Something he had thought lost with his wife. For the first time since that night of tragedy, he felt his heart open. He realized that the courage to care, the patience to heal, and the love to nurture these were the things that truly held a family together. And Maya, quiet and steadfast, had become the heart of it all. One afternoon, after Leo drifted off to nap peacefully in Maya's lap, Richard finally approached her. "Maya, I need to apologize," he said, his voice low and unsteady. "I was furious. I overreacted." Maya looked at him, eyes weary but steady. "I understand," she said softly. "You thought I harmed him. I get it." "I've been watching," Richard admitted, "the way you handle him, the patience, the gentleness. I didn't realize until now." He paused. "Tell me about yourself. What made you capable of doing this?" Maya hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I used to be a nurse. Pediatric care. I've worked with children with trauma and behavioral disorders before." Richard nodded slowly. "That explains a lot. I should have asked, should have trusted you." Maya's lips pressed together, a quiet acknowledgement. Richard cleared his throat. "I want to make this right. I want to offer you a permanent position. You'll be the head caregiver, officially, and your salary will be doubled. You deserve it, and so does Leo." Maya blinked, surprised, but the hint of a smile tugged at her lips. "Thank you. I'll do my best." Richard exhaled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. For the first time in months, he felt hope. Watching Maya with his son, seeing the small but meaningful progress Leo had made, his heart stirred in a way it hadn't since his wife's death. She wasn't just keeping Leo safe, she was helping him live again. From that day forward, Richard made a point to observe quietly, to step back and let Maya guide Leo. And as the boy smiled more, laughed more, and spoke more, Richard realized that admiration and respect for Maya had grown into something deeper. The heart of his family had been quietly nurtured in her hands, and he would never forget it. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Langston estate, glinting off the polished hardwood floors and the rows of expensive books lining the study. The house, usually immaculate, felt strangely quiet. Richard Langston sat in his leather chair, arms crossed, staring at the monitor on the wall that displayed the nursery. Leo slept peacefully, face calm for the first time in weeks, while Maya William hovered nearby, tidying the small blanket around him. Richard cleared his throat and finally spoke, though his voice was softer than it had been the night before. How did you get him to calm down so quickly?" Maya didn't look up immediately, gently brushing a strand of blonde hair from Leo's forehead. "He trusts me," she said simply. "That's all. I stay calm. I don't rush him, and I let him know I'm not going anywhere. That's all it takes for him to feel safe." Richard exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. Watching Maya in action was both humbling and oddly enlightening. For months, he had been lost in board meetings, spreadsheets, and conference calls, thinking that control was the only way to fix his fractured family. Now he realized how little he actually knew about his son or about what it meant to parent. Maya shifted Leo slightly in her arms, whispering, "Time for breakfast, honey. Do you want eggs or oatmeal today?" Leo mumbled something incoherent but moved toward the high chair, still clutching Maya's hand. Richard watched, silently amazed at the small but significant progress. Later, in the kitchen, Maya prepared a simple breakfast of scrambled eggs with cheese and a side of fresh fruit. She worked with a quiet efficiency, humming softly to herself. Leo sat perched on a high stool, occasionally reaching out to touch her arm or peek at the pan as it sizzled. Richard lingered at the doorway, unsure whether to intervene or leave them alone. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Maya," she turned, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, sir?" He hesitated, feeling awkward and unfamiliar with this vulnerability. I just want to understand. How did you do it? How do you get him to respond to you when no one else can? Maya smiled faintly. It's not magic. It's patience. It's listening to him, even when he can't speak. It's giving him choices, letting him have control over the small things, and being consistent. That's all he needs. Richard nodded slowly, the weight of his own failings pressing down on him. He had tried to control everything after his wife died, the house, the company, even Leo, but he had ignored the simplest, most human needs of his son. Maya's approach was a mirror, reflecting his negligence back at him, but also showing the possibility of repair. As the days went by, Richard began to observe more deliberately. He noticed the little things. How Maya encouraged Leo to brush his teeth on his own, praising each movement with quiet enthusiasm. How she read books with voices for every character, making him laugh softly. How she allowed him to explore the backyard without interference, following him at a careful distance. One afternoon, Leo fell while running across the grass, scraping his knee. Maya appeared instantly, gently scooping him up, examining the wound with practiced hands. "It's just a scratch, sweetheart," she said, dabbing it with antiseptic and applying a small bandage. She kissed the top of his head and whispered, "You're brave. You did great." Richard watched from the porch, his chest tightening. He felt the sting of tears he refused to let fall. This young woman, whom he had misjudged and almost blamed for his son's injuries, was the one holding his son together. The thought was almost too much to bear. That evening, Richard found himself sitting in the nursery again, long after Maya had left. He didn't know why he lingered there, staring at the small figure of Leo asleep under the soft glow of the nightlight. Perhaps it was guilt, or perhaps a desperate hope to witness even a fragment of progress. He thought about his wife, about how much she had loved this boy, how much she would have wanted him to heal. The following week brought small victories. Leo began to speak in full sentences again, sometimes mumbling answers to Maya's gentle questions, sometimes laughing at her playful exaggerations of the stories she read. Richard's heart ached with each sound of his son's voice, so faint and fragile, yet infinitely precious. He began to leave reports, meetings, and calls unfinished, sneaking into the nursery at odd hours just to watch them. One night, after a long day of company strategy meetings, Richard found Leo sitting on the floor with Maya, building a tower of blocks. The boy's concentration was intense, and he grinned as the tower wobbled but didn't fall. Maya clapped softly, and Leo looked up at her with the kind of trust Richard hadn't seen in months. "You did it," she whispered, ruffling his hair. "You built it all by yourself." "La." Leo beamed, then turned to Richard for the first time in days, a shy smile breaking across his face. Richard felt his chest tighten, the slow, unfamiliar warmth of hope and pride coursing through him. This tiny smile, the subtle acknowledgement of his presence, was enough to make him understand that Maya was not just helping his son, she was rebuilding the fractured foundation of their lives. If you feel the hope in this moment, give Maya a like and comment where you're watching from. Who knows, someone nearby might be watching this story along with you right now. Weeks later, Richard began leaving little notes for Maya, thanking her quietly, observing without interfering, and allowing her the space to work her gentle magic. He saw Leo attempt to talk about his mother, small sentences at first, then longer recollections, punctuated by questions and giggles, and sometimes by tears. Each interaction strengthened the bond not only between Maya and Leo, but also between Richard and his son, though he remained cautious, unsure how to approach without breaking the fragile trust Maya had cultivated. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that Richard realized something profound. He had underestimated Maya not because of her age or position, but because he had assumed authority and power were enough to fix what grief had broken. They were not. It was compassion, consistency, and courage, qualities he had been too proud or too numb to embody, that healed the wounds of a child who had nearly lost hope. Richard leaned back in the chair, letting the sound of his son's laughter and Maya's soft hum fill the room. He felt his own heart stirring in ways he hadn't allowed in months. There was admiration, gratitude, and something tender, unfamiliar, yet undeniable, a sense that his family, once shattered by loss and misunderstanding, was beginning to breathe again. Maya, unaware of his presence behind the curtain of the nursery doorway, continued to guide Leo, her hands gentle, her voice patient, her laughter a balm for the boy who had known only fear and silence. Richard knew, without a doubt, that it was her unwavering presence that had brought him to this point, and he felt a deep, aching respect for her. For the first time since his wife's death, Richard Langston allowed himself to imagine a future where his son could truly smile again. And he knew, silently, that Maya William had become more than a caretaker. She had become the heart of their fragile, recovering world. The morning air in the Langston estate was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain-soaked gardens from the night before. Richard Langston sat in the sunlit study, the curtains drawn just enough to let the light fall across his desk, illuminating papers he hadn't touched in hours. He wasn't thinking about the company today. He was thinking about the laughter that had echoed through the nursery the night before. Leo had laughed. A real, unprompted laugh, not the timid giggle that Maya coaxed from him in fragments. Richard rubbed his eyes, disbelief mingling with a sense of awe. He had spent weeks observing, hesitant to intrude, watching Maya's steady hand guide his son from fear into curiosity, from silence into voice. And now, finally, there was laughter. He felt a pang in his chest, a mixture of pride, guilt, and gratitude, all tangled together. He rose from the chair and made his way quietly to the nursery. The door was ajar, and through it, he could see Leo sitting on the floor, scattered blocks around him. Maya knelt beside him, her voice soft and encouraging. "Higher, Leo. You can do it. Just a little higher." Leo concentrated, his tongue peeking out in determination, carefully balancing another block atop the small tower. Richard stood silently, watching. He had never seen his son so focused, so unafraid. Maya's presence calmed the boy in a way that no amount of his own authority or money ever could. The contrast between his previous helplessness and this fragile triumph was staggering. Suddenly, the tower wobbled, and Leo gasped. Maya's hand darted out just in time to steady the blocks. "You've got it, Leo. That's perfect," she whispered, smiling. At that exact moment, Leo laughed a short, joyful sound that made Richard's chest tighten so much he could barely breathe. The laugh repeated, and then he clapped, proud of himself. Richard stepped inside, clearing his throat. Maya glanced at him, a brief flicker of apprehension crossing her face. But she said nothing, continuing to encourage Leo. Richard took a deep breath. "Mind if I try?" he asked cautiously, kneeling down beside them. Leo looked up at him, eyes wide but unafraid. Slowly, he handed Richard a block. Maya gave him an approving nod. "Go ahead, just be gentle." Richard carefully added the block to the top of the tower. It wobbled dangerously, but he held it steady. And when it balanced, Leo's laughter erupted again, louder this time. Maya clapped softly, joining in the applause. Richard smiled, feeling something he hadn't felt in months: hope. After breakfast, Richard suggested they go to the park. Leo hesitated at first, but Maya knelt beside him, taking his hand. "Come on, little adventurer," she whispered. "Let's see what's outside today." Leo let go of his fear just enough to allow her guidance. And for the first time, he ran freely across the open lawn, arms outstretched like wings. Richard watched from a distance, heart swelling. He felt the weight of his past failures, the nights he had left Leo alone to mourn, the silences that had stretched for months, the guilt he had carried like a stone in his chest. And yet, he saw now the possibility of repair, of recovery, guided by Maya's unwavering patience and quiet strength. Back at the estate, Maya prepared lunch. She moved around the kitchen with precise ease, humming under her breath, the smell of roasted chicken filling the air. Leo sat at the table, eating slowly, but without complaint. Richard lingered at the doorway, not wanting to interrupt, not wanting to impose, just watching the rhythm of their lives. It struck him that for all his wealth, he had never known what it meant to truly care for someone in need, to heal someone with presence rather than power. In the afternoon, Richard decided to check the security footage again, not to criticize, not to find fault, but to understand. He watched Maya patiently coax Leo away from dangerous situations, redirecting him, calming his panic. Every movement, every gentle touch, every soft-spoken word revealed a depth of empathy he hadn't expected. He saw clearly now that his earlier anger, his rash judgments, had been born from fear and grief, not reality. His son's injuries were self-inflicted out of emotional pain, not malice, and Maya had prevented far worse outcomes countless times. Richard felt a pang of shame, thinking back to the night he had almost struck her in anger. He remembered the vase, the lamp, his own fists shaking, his voice like thunder, and he shuddered. If Maya had not remained calm, if she had not been strong, Leo might have been harmed even more. He made a silent vow to himself. He would never allow fear or pride to dictate his actions with his son again. Evening came, and Richard lingered in the nursery while Maya read a story. He noticed the subtle changes in Leo, how he made eye contact, how he responded to questions, how he laughed at the funny voices Maya made. Each moment was a small miracle, a testament to patience, consistency, and care. Richard realized that he had been blind not to Leo's suffering alone, but to the quiet heroism of the person who had devoted herself to helping him heal. As night fell, Richard finally spoke, voice low and unsteady. "Maya, I—" He paused, swallowing hard. "I misjudged you. I see now. You've done more for him than I could ever have imagined." Maya looked up from the book she was holding, a faint smile on her face. "I don't do it for praise," she said softly. "I do it because he needs someone to stay." Richard nodded, feeling the truth in her words resonate deep inside him. For the first time since his wife's death, he felt a fragile peace, a sense that perhaps the shattered pieces of his family could be mended. And he understood, finally, that courage and compassion often came from the most unexpected places. Leo yawned and stretched, curling back into Maya's lap. Richard watched the gentle curve of his son's back, the relaxed shoulders, the calm breathing. He felt a profound gratitude, a stirring in his chest that made him almost believe that laughter, love, and healing could exist even after unimaginable loss. "I'll do whatever it takes," Richard said quietly to himself. "I'll follow her example. I'll learn from her. I won't fail him again." Maya looked up, catching the words, but she only nodded. She didn't need to speak. Her actions had already shown Richard everything he needed to know. Leo shifted slightly, opening his eyes and meeting his father's gaze with a tiny, tentative smile. Richard's chest tightened. That single gesture, so small, yet so full of meaning, was enough to shake the walls he had built around his heart. For the first time in months, Richard felt his own heart begin to soften. Watching Maya guide Leo, seeing the boy's laughter and small victories, he realized that the true measure of strength was not in power or wealth, but in patience, presence, and the willingness to care. And in that quiet nursery, as rain pattered softly against the windows, Richard Langston understood that his son's healing, and perhaps even his own, depended not on what he could command, but on the steady, unwavering courage of the young woman who had refused to leave his son's side. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Langston estate, bathing the nursery in a soft golden glow. Leo was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor, carefully arranging his blocks in a neat line. His movements were deliberate, controlled, almost meditative, and Richard watched from the doorway, feeling a mix of awe and trepidation. He could see the progress Leo had made over the past weeks, each small step a testament to Maya's unwavering patience. Maya knelt beside him, guiding his tiny hands, whispering encouragements in a voice so calm and steady that it seemed to echo through the boy's mind and settle his restless thoughts. "That's it, Leo. One more block. Carefully. Yes. Perfect." Leo's lips curved into a shy smile, and Maya mirrored it with quiet pride. Richard cleared his throat. "May I?" he asked softly, gesturing to the empty space beside Maya. She looked up, eyes warm but cautious, and nodded slightly. Richard sat, careful not to disturb the fragile rhythm that had been established between Maya and his son. He took a block in his hand, hesitating as he tried to mimic the gentle encouragement Maya used. "Careful, Leo, you've got this." Leo glanced up briefly, then returned to his work, seemingly confident in Richard's presence. It was a small victory, but for Richard, it felt monumental. He realized how little he had understood about parenting, about presence, about the subtle ways a child's world could be reshaped through patience and care. Later that morning, Maya prepared breakfast. Scrambled eggs with a hint of cheddar, toast cut into small triangles, and a bowl of fresh strawberries. Leo sat at the high chair, eagerly nibbling at the food, occasionally glancing at Richard, as if testing the waters of his father's attention. Maya moved gracefully between them, chatting softly, asking small questions, keeping the atmosphere light yet structured. Richard stood nearby, noticing the small gestures, the way Maya encouraged Leo to chew slowly, the gentle praise for each completed task, the calm repetition that soothed his anxious mind. After breakfast, they moved to the garden. Richard observed from the patio as Maya led Leo around the lawn, allowing him to explore freely while maintaining a careful watch. Leo reached out to touch the blossoms, crouching low to examine a small ladybug. Maya knelt beside him, whispering explanations about the insect, encouraging his curiosity, and celebrating his attention span. Richard's chest swelled with a complicated mix of emotion. He was witnessing a transformation that he had not thought possible. The boy who had barely spoken now responded to encouragement, engaged with the world, and trusted Maya completely. At midday, Maya suggested a quiet reading session. Leo settled onto the floor with a book, flipping the pages slowly while Maya read aloud, giving distinct voices to each character. Richard watched as his son's eyes followed the illustrations, his attention captivated. Occasionally, he laughed quietly, a small, clear sound that resonated like a bell in the otherwise silent house. Richard felt a lump in his throat. He realized that this laughter was more than amusement, it was freedom, a reclaiming of childhood lost to grief. Richard finally spoke, his voice tentative. "Maya, do you think he'll ever fully recover?" Maya looked at him, considering the question carefully. "Recovery isn't about returning to who he was before," she said softly. "It's about giving him the tools to live, to feel safe, to trust. He's already come so far in a few weeks. With continued support, patience, and love, he'll find his way." Richard nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. He had been obsessed with fixing things immediately, controlling outcomes, expecting results. But Maya's approach, quiet, consistent, compassionate, was something entirely different. It was healing through presence rather than force, through empathy rather than authority. The afternoon brought a challenge. Leo became restless, his energy unpredictable. He wandered toward the staircase, glancing back at Maya with a hint of defiance. Maya followed calmly, hands extended in invitation, her voice soft yet firm. "Leo, come with me, let's play on the rug, we'll build a new tower together." Leo hesitated, then ran up the steps before Maya could reach him. Richard's heart skipped a beat. The boy had fallen here before, several weeks ago, and the memory of that panic surged anew. Maya's expression tightened for a fraction of a second, then she composed herself, taking deliberate, careful steps after him. She caught him just as he stumbled, holding him close and murmuring reassurances. Richard watched, holding his breath. He could see the trust between them, a delicate, unspoken contract being reinforced in every small action. He realized that each challenge, each misstep, was part of the process. Recovery was not linear. It was a series of micro moments, victories and setbacks, navigated with patience and compassion. As the day progressed, Richard found himself reflecting on his own behavior, the outburst, the smashing of objects, the moment he had almost struck Maya in anger. Guilt gnawed at him, but it was tempered by awe at her resilience. She had remained steadfast, fearless in the face of his fury, and unwavering in her care for Leo. She had held his son's life, literally and figuratively, in her hands, and had succeeded where he had failed. Evening fell, and the three of them moved back inside. Maya prepared a simple dinner, while Richard quietly set the table, trying to participate without overstepping. Leo ate with enthusiasm, occasionally glancing at his father with the tiniest hint of recognition, a tentative bridge being built between them. After dinner, they settled in the living room. Maya read another story while Leo leaned against her, absorbed in the tale. Richard sat nearby, watching as his son laughed quietly at the funny voices, the playful inflections in Maya's reading. He felt a rush of emotion, gratitude, humility, hope. He realized that the healing that had begun between Maya and Leo was also healing him, softening the edges of grief and regret that had hardened over the past months. Before bedtime, Maya helped Leo with his nightly routine, guiding him through brushing his teeth and washing his face. She sang softly as she worked, a lullaby-like rhythm that seemed to settle him completely. Richard, standing in the doorway, felt tears sting his eyes. He had thought he could protect his son with authority and wealth alone, but he had learned that love, patience, and presence were infinitely more powerful. When Leo finally fell asleep, Maya gently placed him in his bed and covered him with a soft blanket. Richard approached quietly, standing beside her. "Thank you," he whispered, voice thick. "For everything. I see it now. I see what you've done." Maya glanced at him, a faint smile touching her lips. "He's your son. You just needed to let someone show you how to reach him." Richard nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. The weight of his earlier mistakes pressed on him, but the sight of his son safe, calm, and beginning to laugh again brought a fragile sense of peace. He realized that the road ahead would not be easy, but with Maya's guidance and unwavering presence, Leo could learn to live again. And perhaps, Richard thought quietly, he could learn to be a father worthy of his son's trust. For the first time in months, the house felt alive, not haunted by loss, but warmed by hope. Leo's laughter echoed softly through the rooms, Maya's gentle voice guiding him, and Richard watched, heart stirring, knowing that change, patience, and love could indeed rebuild what tragedy had almost destroyed. As he turned to leave the nursery, Richard whispered under his breath, "I'll do better. We'll do better." For him, the morning light filtered softly through the tall windows of the Langston estate, painting long stripes of gold across the polished hardwood floors. Richard Langston sat at his usual spot in the study, coffee in hand, eyes fixed not on his work but on the nursery monitor. He watched Maya William guide Leo through his morning routine, gently coaxing him into brushing his teeth, tying his shoelaces, and choosing his clothes. Each task was deliberate, slow, and carefully managed, but Leo moved with more confidence than he had just a few weeks ago. Richard leaned back in his chair, letting out a long breath. He thought of his wife, Elizabeth, and the quiet house that had followed her sudden death 9 months ago. The grief had been suffocating for them all, especially for Leo, who at first had barely spoken a word and had refused to eat or leave his room. Richard had tried to compensate with gifts, routines, and rules, but none of it had worked. Only Maya, steadfast, patient, unwavering, had been able to reach the boy, to coax him out of the shadows into even a fragment of childhood again. Maya moved gracefully through the room, kneeling to guide Leo into a small chair. "Remember to lift the toothbrush gently, Leo," she whispered. He obeyed, his small hand trembling slightly, but she placed hers over his, steadying him. "Good. That's perfect." Leo's lips curved into a small, proud smile. Richard felt his chest tighten. Suddenly, a loud clatter echoed from the hallway. Leo had tipped over a box of toys, scattering blocks and stuffed animals across the floor. Maya's eyes widened for just a second, but she immediately smiled and said, "Oh, looks like we have a small mess to clean up. Let's make it a game." She guided him to pick up the toys, counting each one aloud. The boy's attention was fully engaged. And for the first time that day, he laughed spontaneously. A clear sound that made Richard's heart ache with both joy and lingering guilt. Richard set his coffee down, quietly stepping toward the doorway. He lingered, unwilling to interrupt the moment. Maya glanced at him briefly, offering a faint nod before returning her focus to Leo. The boy grabbed her hand as she handed him the last block, and they exchanged a high five when the tower was rebuilt. Richard could hardly believe the transformation. The boy who had once hidden from the world now played, laughed, and responded to guidance. After breakfast, Richard suggested a drive to the nearby park. Maya packed a small bag with snacks, water, and a few of Leo's favorite books. "A short walk," she said, smiling at the boy. "We'll read under the oak tree." Richard followed silently, sitting in the back seat, observing quietly as Maya encouraged Leo to hop into the car. Leo pressed his tiny hand against hers, a small gesture of trust and reassurance. Once they arrived at the park, Leo ran ahead, darting between the trees, laughing as Maya called out gentle reminders to be careful. Richard watched the scene unfold and felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. Watching Maya with Leo, he realized how far they had come from that terrifying night when he had misunderstood the situation completely. He remembered his fury, the objects he had thrown, the words he had shouted, the way he had allowed anger to overpower reason. He shuddered at the memory. If Maya had not remained calm, if she had not acted with such courage, Leo might have been seriously hurt. The afternoon passed with quiet lessons. Maya showed Leo how to climb the small jungle gym safely, then guided him to identify flowers and insects along the walking path. Richard noticed the boy's curiosity, the way he reached out to touch petals or watch ants march in lines, his small mind exploring a world he had once ignored. Maya explained each detail in gentle, encouraging tones, allowing him to ask questions, praising even the smallest discoveries. Richard felt a deep admiration for her approach, recognizing that healing came not from force or discipline, but from patience, understanding, and presence. On the drive home, Leo leaned against Maya, dozing lightly in the passenger seat. Richard drove silently, reflecting on the past months. He thought about Elizabeth, about the accident that had taken her from them, about the nights when Leo had cried himself to sleep alone, and he thought about how Maya had taken on the impossible task of repairing not only his son's fractured childhood but the shattered remnants of their family. Once home, Maya prepared a light dinner while Richard assisted quietly, fetching plates and setting the table. He watched her interact with Leo, offering small pieces of encouragement and praise, keeping the mood calm and supportive. The boy responded eagerly, giggling at Maya's playful voices as she narrated a short story about a mischievous squirrel. Richard realized that these small, seemingly mundane interactions were the foundation of Leo's progress, and without Maya's careful guidance, none of it would have been possible. After dinner, Maya led Leo to his bedtime routine. She guided him through washing his face, brushing his teeth, and changing into pajamas. Richard lingered near the doorway, reluctant to intrude but unable to tear himself away. As Leo settled into bed, Maya sang softly, a lullaby-like rhythm that made the boy relax completely. His breathing evened, his small hands resting calmly on the blanket. Richard stepped closer. "Maya," he began, voice low, hesitant. I want to apologize again. For the night. For my anger. For not understanding." Maya looked up, a faint smile on her lips. "I know you didn't mean to. Fear and grief can make anyone act without thinking. You love your son, Richard. That's clear." Richard nodded, swallowing hard. "It's just, seeing him like this, laughing, trusting, I realize how little I understood, how much I've missed. I want to be better. For him, for us." Maya's eyes softened. "You can be, but it's a process. Patience, consistency, and showing up every single day. That's what he needs most." Richard's gaze fell to Leo, asleep now, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. He felt a profound gratitude toward Maya, a stirring of emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in months. He understood, finally, that the true strength lay in compassion, courage, and the willingness to stay present for someone who needed it most. As he turned to leave the room, he whispered under his breath, "Thank you, Maya, for staying, for him, and for me." Maya glanced up, catching his words, but she only nodded, letting the silence speak volumes. Leo shifted slightly in his sleep, reaching a tiny hand toward the edge of the blanket. Richard watched, heart swelling, knowing that this fragile trust, the bond between his son and Maya, and now between himself and both of them, was the beginning of a new chapter for their lives. Outside, the estate was quiet, the last rays of sunlight casting long shadows across the garden. Richard lingered on the porch thinking about the journey ahead. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of fear. But he had seen the power of patience, presence, and unwavering care. And he knew, deep within, that with Maya guiding Leo, and him learning to follow, the boy could not only heal but thrive. Richard Langston finally allowed himself to imagine a future where his son could be truly happy again. And as he watched Maya tuck away the final toys and gently close Leo's book, he felt a quiet, profound shift within himself, a sense of hope, of awe, and of a heart beginning to heal alongside his son's. The morning sunlight spilled across the Langston estate, illuminating the quiet elegance of the house that had once felt empty and heavy with grief. Richard Langston stood in the study, his coffee forgotten on the desk, eyes fixed on the monitor that displayed the nursery. Leo sat on the floor, absorbed in building a tower of blocks, his concentration absolute. Maya William knelt beside him, whispering gentle guidance, steadying his tiny hands when necessary, praising each careful placement. Richard watched, struck by the contrast between the scared, withdrawn boy of weeks ago and the child now beginning to reclaim pieces of his childhood. Almost there, Leo. That's it. Carefully. Yes. Maya's voice was soft, filled with encouragement. Leo's small lips curved into a smile, and for the first time in what felt like forever, his laughter bubbled freely. Richard felt a lump rise in his throat, realizing this was not just progress in play, but the first glimmer of healing for his son's spirit. After breakfast, Maya suggested a short walk through the estate gardens. Richard followed quietly, observing as Maya encouraged Leo to explore the path ahead, pointing out flowers, insects, and the subtle patterns in the paving stones. She celebrated every discovery, no matter how small, and Leo responded with curiosity and delight. His steps were cautious at first, tentative as though testing the world, but soon he was running short distances, laughing, and turning back to Maya for reassurance. Richard felt awe and gratitude building in equal measure. He had thought his authority or wealth could protect his son, but it was Maya's patience, her calm, her presence, that was making the real difference. Back inside, Maya organized a small activity station, spreading out colored pencils, paper, and simple puzzles. She encouraged Leo to choose a puzzle, guiding him without pressure, allowing him to take the lead. Richard watched, silent, as Leo worked through the shapes, struggling at first, but persevering. Every completed section drew soft praise from Maya, and Leo's pride grew with each small success. Richard marveled at the change. The boy who had once retreated from every task was now engaged, focused, and discovering the joy of accomplishment. Later, they moved to the kitchen for lunch. Maya prepared a simple meal: baked chicken tenders, roasted vegetables, and mashed potatoes, served with a side of fresh fruit. She guided Leo through eating independently, encouraging him to use his fork and to take small bites, praising his effort rather than perfection. Richard lingered, standing near the counter, marveling at the routine that had been established. It was ordinary, mundane even, but for this family, it was extraordinary. Each step represented trust rebuilt, patience rewarded, and love expressed in quiet, deliberate ways. After lunch, Richard suggested they visit a nearby park he remembered from his childhood. He drove silently, observing Leo in the back seat, clutching Maya's hand. The boy's energy was palpable, and he spoke in small sentences, a remarkable development considering the months of silence. Maya's encouraging smile and steady voice guided him, and Richard realized that he had been witnessing a transformation not through words, but through careful, consistent action. At the park, Leo ran toward the playground, eyes bright with excitement. Maya followed at a measured pace, allowing him freedom while remaining vigilant. Richard watched, marveling at the sight. The child who had once hidden from the world was now exploring it with curiosity, responding to encouragement, and beginning to understand the rhythms of trust and safety. Maya knelt beside him as he climbed the small slide, her hands hovering close to catch him if he faltered. "That's it, Leo. Carefully." "Yes." He reached the bottom with a triumphant squeal, and Maya clapped softly, echoing his joy. Richard felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. They returned home in the late afternoon, the boy quiet now but smiling intermittently. Maya led him through a calm, structured afternoon, reading stories, guiding him through simple exercises in drawing and letter recognition, and allowing quiet reflection. Richard watched, noticing subtle changes in Leo's confidence, his willingness to explore, his readiness to interact with both Maya and his father. Every action, every gentle correction, every soft word from Maya reinforced a growing sense of safety and self-worth in the child. In the evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the estate grew quiet, Maya guided Leo through his bedtime routine. He brushed his teeth without complaint, changed into pajamas, and settled into bed with a small stuffed animal clutched to his chest. Maya sang softly, the rhythm of her voice a gentle anchor. Richard lingered in the doorway, watching the scene, his chest tight with emotion. The fear and tension that had filled the house weeks ago had softened. Now, the space was filled with warmth, trust, and tentative hope. Finally, Richard stepped forward, breaking the quiet. "Maya," he said softly, voice tinged with both awe and humility. I can't thank you enough. For everything. For him. For me." Maya looked up from the book she was holding, eyes calm, steady, and kind. "You've been here too, Richard," she replied. "You've learned, you've observed, you've tried. That's part of it. The rest is just being present with him, day by day." Richard nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He reflected on his own failures, the anger, the fear, the nights he had abandoned his son to grief. But now, seeing Maya's steadfast care, he understood that love and patience were stronger than fear and guilt. The boy in the bed, asleep and calm, was proof that healing could begin when presence and trust replaced authority and anger. Maya straightened Leo's blanket one last time before standing. She glanced at Richard, a faint smile of reassurance and quiet pride touching her lips. "He's safe now, and he's learning," she said softly. "He's learning how to feel safe, how to trust, and how to be a child again." Richard exhaled slowly, feeling an unexpected weight lift from his shoulders. The journey ahead would be long, he knew that, but seeing his son respond, laugh, and explore had stirred something deep within him. Gratitude, yes, but also a quiet hope, a belief that even after tragedy, family could be rebuilt, trust could be restored, and hearts could heal. As he watched Maya leave the room, guiding Leo gently with a hand on his back, Richard felt his own resolve solidify. He would follow her example, learn from her patience and courage, and do whatever it took to support his son. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to imagine a future filled not with fear or regret, but with moments of joy, discovery, and the fragile, growing bond of family restored. Leo stirred, stretching his small arms, and turned his face toward Richard, offering a tentative smile. Richard's chest tightened with a mixture of pride, love, and awe. This smile, so small yet so meaningful, represented the first real step toward normalcy for his son. He realized that the world, once dark and silent for Leo, was slowly becoming a place of color, laughter, and hope, and that Maya had been the bridge that brought them here. Richard stepped quietly to the bed, kneeling beside his son and whispering, "I'm here, Leo. I'm staying." Maya smiled, watching them, knowing that the foundation she had helped build would continue to grow with each passing day. And as the last light of day faded, Richard felt his heart stir with something he hadn't felt in months: faith. Faith in his son, faith in the strength of compassion, and faith that even broken families could find their way back to one another. The morning light crept into the Langston estate, soft and golden, spilling over the polished floors and the elegant furnishings that had long been silent witnesses to grief. Richard Langston sat in the study, a cup of coffee untouched at his side, eyes fixed on the nursery monitor. Leo was awake, perched on the floor with his blocks and a small stack of picture books. Maya William knelt beside him, her hand lightly resting on his shoulder, guiding him through the careful placement of a block. The boy's focus was absolute, but there was a new energy in him, a spark of curiosity, a glimmer of trust that had been absent for months. "Look at this one, Leo," Maya whispered, pointing to a bright red block. "Can you place it on top without it falling?" Leo's small fingers grasped the block, hesitated, and then carefully set it atop the tower. It wobbled slightly, but he held his breath and adjusted it just enough to balance. Maya clapped softly, smiling. "Perfect. You did it all by yourself." Richard felt a warmth rise in his chest. This was not just a moment of play, it was a moment of triumph. The boy who had once flinched from any touch, who had recoiled from the world after his mother's death, was learning to trust, to experiment, and to succeed. And Maya was at the center of it all, steady, calm, and patient. Later, after breakfast, Maya suggested a walk through the garden. Leo ran ahead, exploring the paths, the flowers, and the little stone statues that dotted the lawn. Maya followed closely, encouraging him gently. "Careful, Leo. Watch your step. Look at the ladybug." Richard followed at a distance, observing quietly. He had begun to understand something fundamental. It wasn't the lessons themselves that mattered most, it was the way Maya delivered them, with care, attention, and consistency. She allowed Leo to make small choices, to explore boundaries safely, and to build confidence with each step. Watching this, Richard felt both admiration and a twinge of guilt. He had been too absent, too preoccupied with his work, and now he saw the difference that presence, patience, and understanding could make. Back inside, Maya led Leo through a quiet reading session. She read in a gentle voice, giving distinct personalities to each character, and Leo listened intently, sometimes laughing softly at the playful voices she used. Richard noticed that the boy was beginning to speak in full sentences, responding to questions with short but coherent answers. The progress was subtle but profound. He saw that Maya's guidance was more than supervision, it was a bridge, connecting Leo back to the world he had withdrawn from. Midday brought a new challenge. Leo became restless, bouncing from the floor to the window, then toward the hallway. Maya followed calmly, whispering encouragements. "Leo, let's build another tower. We can make it even taller than the last one." The boy hesitated, then turned back toward her, and together they started anew. Richard watched, struck by the delicate balance of freedom and structure that Maya provided. He realized that this was the secret to the boy's progress. Not orders, not discipline, but gentle boundaries and trust, paired with encouragement. After lunch, Maya prepared a simple meal: grilled cheese sandwiches, carrot sticks, and a small bowl of apple slices. Leo ate with enthusiasm, guided gently by Maya's hand. Richard stayed nearby, watching quietly, noticing the subtle interactions, the soft praise, the calm tone, the pauses that allowed Leo to respond and engage. Each small act reinforced confidence, trust, and a sense of security that Richard had feared lost forever. Later, they moved to the playroom, where Leo engaged in imaginative play. He arranged toy figures on a small rug, narrating stories with Maya's soft guidance. "The knight protects the princess, Leo. Can you place him here?" Maya suggested, and Leo did so carefully. The boy's voice was clear, his tone confident, and he even added small details on his own. Richard's heart swelled. This was more than play. It was communication, imagination, and growth. He realized how far they had come from the days when Leo barely spoke, barely smiled, and had retreated from the world entirely. Evening arrived, and Maya guided Leo through his bedtime routine. He brushed his teeth without complaint, changed into pajamas, and settled into bed with a small stuffed bear clutched in his hands. Maya sang softly, a lullaby-like rhythm, and Leo's breathing gradually evened. Richard lingered near the doorway, watching, feeling the ache of his past mistakes alongside the quiet hope that now filled the room. Finally, Richard stepped forward, his voice tentative. "Maya, I need to thank you again, for everything you've done." Maya looked up, her eyes calm and steady. "You're welcome," she said softly. "He's your son. He's learning because you've allowed him to feel safe." Richard's chest tightened. I see now. The way you've guided him, the way you've stayed calm. It's more than I could have done alone. I see my failures. And I want to do better. For him. For us." Maya nodded, a faint smile crossing her lips. "It's a process, Richard. One day at a time. You're learning too, and that matters." Richard gazed at Leo, asleep now, the small rise and fall of his chest gentle and steady. He felt gratitude and awe, mixed with a profound determination. The road ahead would not be easy, but the trust that Maya had built, the laughter that had returned to Leo, and the fragile bond forming between father and son were enough to give him hope. He finally allowed himself to reflect on the weeks past the night he had misjudged Maya, his anger, his fear, and the objects he had thrown in frustration. He thought of the hospital visits, the slow rebuilding of trust, and the small victories that now marked each day. Most importantly, he recognized Maya's role not just as a caregiver, but as a guide, a teacher, and a stabilizing presence who had bridged the gap between grief and recovery. Leo stirred slightly, opening his eyes, and gave a tentative smile at Richard. The boy's small hand reached out, brushing against his father's. Richard felt his heart expand with emotion. It was a simple gesture, but it carried a weight beyond words, a symbol of trust, progress, and a tentative connection that had been absent for so long. Maya straightened the blanket around Leo and rose, smiling gently at Richard. "He's learning," she said. "He's learning to trust, to explore, and to be himself again. That's what matters most." Richard nodded silently. He realized that he had been given a second chance not just to witness his son's healing, but to participate in it, to follow the example of courage, patience, and unwavering care that Maya had set. For the first time since his wife's death, he felt the possibility of joy, of family, and of hope for the future. As the night descended on the estate, Richard lingered in the nursery, watching the peaceful scene. Leo slept soundly, Maya's gentle presence nearby, and the room was filled not with fear or anger, but with trust, healing, and the quiet stirrings of happiness returning to their lives. Richard knew that the journey ahead would require patience, understanding, and constant attention, but he also knew that together, with Maya guiding Leo and him learning to follow, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Richard whispered softly to himself, "We will get there, together." He left the room quietly, heart full of a hope he had thought lost, ready to face the days ahead with renewed commitment to his son, to Maya, and to the fragile, beautiful family they were slowly rebuilding. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Langston estate, casting long, warm rays across the nursery floor. Leo sat cross-legged on the rug, surrounded by his favorite picture books and building blocks. Maya William knelt beside him, her hands gently guiding his small fingers as he arranged the blocks into a complex structure. The boy's concentration was remarkable. The quiet determination in his eyes showed a confidence that had been absent only weeks ago. Richard Langston stood nearby, leaning against the doorframe, his coffee cup untouched, observing the scene with a mix of pride and astonishment. Maya spoke softly, "Careful with the top block, Leo. That's it. Perfect." Leo's lips curved into a smile, and a soft laugh escaped him as the tower remained balanced. Richard felt his chest tighten. The sound was so pure, so unguarded, that it struck a chord deep within him. It was the first real laughter he had heard from his son in months. Unprompted. Natural. He realized then that Maya had not just guided Leo through recovery, she had nurtured a spark of joy he feared lost forever. After breakfast, Maya suggested they venture into the garden for some fresh air. Leo's steps were more confident than before, and he darted ahead, exploring the paths lined with blooming flowers and neatly trimmed hedges. Maya followed closely, keeping a careful watch, offering gentle guidance without restricting his movements. "Look at this flower, Leo. Can you smell it? Beautiful, isn't it?" Leo bent down to examine the petals, his small hand brushing the soft edges. Maya knelt beside him, whispering softly, "Good, you noticed it." "Meg." Richard watched silently from the patio, a quiet sense of awe settling over him. He thought back to the months following his wife's death, the emptiness that had engulfed the house, the silence that had consumed his son. The boy who had barely spoken, who had recoiled from the world in fear and grief, was now exploring with curiosity and wonder. Richard realized the depth of Maya's impact. Her patience, her calm, and her unwavering presence had begun to restore not only Leo's trust in the world, but also his father's connection with his child. Later in the morning, they returned inside for a quiet reading session. Maya opened a picture book and began to read aloud, giving voices to each character, changing pitch and tone to convey emotion. Leo followed along, his small hands tracing the pictures, occasionally repeating words she encouraged him to say. "The fox said hello to the bunny," Maya whispered. Leo's eyes widened, and after a moment of hesitation, he repeated, "Hello, bunny." The words were slow, tentative, but clear. Richard's heart surged with emotion. He had witnessed a breakthrough, his son speaking, engaging, and responding, albeit in small fragments, to the world around him. Maya smiled gently. "See? You can do it. Every word counts. Leo beamed, the shy confidence in his eyes shining through. Richard quietly stepped closer, kneeling beside them. Leo, can you say good morning, Daddy? He asked, unsure if the boy would respond. Leo froze for a heartbeat, then whispered, Good morning, Daddy. The words were soft, almost fragile, but they carried a weight that neither time nor grief could diminish. Richard felt tears prick his eyes, the sound of his son speaking directly to him breaking a dam of sorrow and regret. He swallowed hard, unable to speak, his throat tight with emotion. Maya's eyes met his, a small nod passing silently between them, acknowledging the significance of the moment. After the reading session, Maya suggested a creative activity. She laid out crayons and paper and encouraged Leo to draw whatever came to mind. Leo's first few attempts were hesitant lines and circles, but as Maya guided him gently, he began to form shapes, trees, animals, even a small figure he claimed was his mother. Maya praised each effort, emphasizing effort over perfection, patience over speed. Richard watched, marveling at the boy's engagement and the growing confidence in his expressions. The connection between them was becoming tangible words, gestures and creativity bridging the gaps left by months of silence and grief. Midday brought a minor challenge. Leo became restless and wandered toward the staircase, a spark of curiosity leading him toward potential danger. Maya followed calmly, her voice steady. Leo, let's stay together. We can explore over here instead. He hesitated, then turned back toward her guidance. Allowing her to lead him safely to the rug, Richard watched, his chest tight, recognizing the delicate balance of trust and freedom that Maya maintained. Each step, each small decision, was a building block in the boy's healing process. As the afternoon progressed, Richard found himself reflecting on his own behavior. He remembered the night of his rage, the moment he had misunderstood the situation and lashed out, the fear and anger that had blinded him. He thought of the hospital, the trip with Leo in his arms, Maya's silent courage, and the slow rebuilding of trust that had followed. He realized that his son's recovery was not only due to his presence but entirely because of Maya's unwavering dedication and her ability to stay calm under pressure. The weight of his previous mistakes pressed on him, but he allowed himself a quiet sense of humility and gratitude. Evening descended, and Maya guided Leo through his bedtime routine. She washed his face, brushed his teeth, and tucked him into bed, humming softly as she worked. Leo's eyes grew heavy, and he finally settled, clutching a small stuffed animal to his chest. Richard lingered in the doorway, heart full, watching Maya's gentle care. The house, once silent and oppressive, now held warmth, laughter, and a growing sense of hope. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice tentative and hushed. Maya, thank you. For everything. For him. For me. Maya glanced up, her expression calm, composed, yet filled with quiet pride. It's not just me, she said softly. You've been present, you've observed, and you've tried. That matters. He's learning to trust, to feel safe, and to enjoy life again. That's the reward for both of us. Now, Richard nodded, swallowing hard. He realized that the journey ahead would be long and challenging, but the fragile foundation that Maya had helped build trust, patience, and the slow return of joy was strong enough to endure. Leo's laughter, his curiosity, his tentative engagement with the world, had brought not only hope but also a renewed sense of purpose for Richard. As he turned to leave the nursery, he whispered softly, We're going to be okay. I promise, Leo. I'll be here. Maya smiled faintly, a nod of reassurance, knowing that the bond between father and son was slowly strengthening. Leo, stirring slightly in his sleep, reached a tiny hand toward the edge of the blanket, and Richard felt a surge of emotion, understanding that trust, love, and healing were finally taking root. Richard watched Maya adjust the blanket and settle the boy comfortably, and he realized that the true strength of a family lay not in wealth, authority, or control, but in patience, presence, and unwavering care. In this moment, he allowed himself to believe that their fractured family could be whole again, that laughter and love could return, and that with Maya's guidance, Leo could continue to reclaim his childhood. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the nursery, Richard Langston stepped quietly from the room, heart swelling with hope, gratitude, and the quiet understanding that healing, though fragile, was well underway. The early morning air in the Langston estate was crisp and carried the faint scent of freshly cut grass. Richard Langston sipped his coffee in the sunroom, eyes occasionally flicking toward the monitor in the nursery. Leo was already awake, crouched on the floor with his blocks and picture books, his small hands moving deliberately, placing each block with care. Maya William knelt beside him, whispering encouragements and occasionally guiding his hands to ensure balance. Richard felt a tightness in his chest. He had witnessed so many small victories over the past weeks, yet each one still filled him with wonder. "Good job, Leo. That's steady," Maya said softly. "Now we can try the red block at the top." Leo hesitated, his fingers trembling slightly as he lifted the block. With Maya's quiet guidance, he placed it carefully atop the tower. It wobbled for a moment, then remained upright. Leo's face lit up with pride, and a soft laugh escaped him. Richard smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and astonishment. Each small act, each incremental step, was a triumph over the months of silence and fear that had once dominated his son's life. After breakfast, Maya suggested they move outside. The garden was vibrant, sunlight glinting on the leaves and flowers that swayed gently in the breeze. Leo ran ahead, arms outstretched, exploring with curiosity and caution. Maya followed, keeping her voice low and soothing. "Look, Leo, a butterfly. Can you see its wings?" The boy crouched, observing the delicate creature. "Wow," he whispered, eyes wide. Maya smiled, praising his observation. "That's right, you noticed it. Excellent." Richard followed at a distance, observing. He felt a mixture of pride, awe, and a quiet shame as he reflected on the months he had been absent, consumed by work and grief. Unable to reach his son, he realized the depth of Maya's impact. It wasn't simply that she had kept him safe, but that she had created an environment where Leo could explore, question, and trust. It was through her steady guidance that his son had begun to reclaim his world. Mid-morning brought a new challenge. Leo spotted a small fountain near the edge of the garden and ran toward it, curiosity pushing him forward. Maya kept pace, calling his name gently. "Leo, slow down. Look where you're going." He paused, listening to her voice, and she extended a hand. He grabbed it, and together they approached the fountain safely. Richard watched, a silent witness to the delicate balance of independence and guidance that Maya had cultivated. It was a dance of trust, patience, and careful boundaries, and he marveled at the skill with which she navigated it. Back inside, Maya set up an arts and crafts activity on the floor. Leo sat cross-legged, crayons in hand, as she encouraged him to draw whatever came to mind. At first, his lines were hesitant, but Maya praised every effort. "Look at that, Leo. Beautiful colors. You're doing so well." Gradually, his strokes became bolder, forming recognizable shapes, trees, animals, even a small house. Richard watched in awe as his son engaged in creation, a stark contrast to the withdrawn child he had been only weeks ago. The simple act of drawing had become an expression of confidence, curiosity, and healing. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, Maya guided Leo through a series of small exercises designed to improve coordination and focus. She set up an obstacle course in the living room, encouraging him to step carefully over cushions, crawl under a small table, and balance along a line of blocks. Each success was met with soft applause and praise. Leo's laughter filled the room, a clear, unrestrained sound that made Richard's chest ache with joy. During a quiet moment, Richard approached Maya. He's doing so well. I can't believe it." Maya smiled softly, her eyes calm. "It's not magic, Richard. It's patience, consistency, and giving him a safe space to grow. Every small victory counts." Richard nodded, taking in the truth of her words. He had spent months trying to control outcomes, to fix what grief had broken with authority and resources. But he realized now that healing came from presence, empathy, and gentle guidance. Maya had provided all of these in abundance, and her influence had transformed Leo's world. Later, They took a short walk around the estate's garden maze. Leo ran ahead, laughing, weaving between the hedges with an unguarded joy. Maya followed, her voice calm and encouraging. Richard walked behind, silently taking note of the boy's progress. Each laugh, each step, each small choice to engage with his surroundings was a testament to the slow, steady work of trust building. He reflected on the night he had misjudged Maya, on the hospital visits, and on the weeks of careful observation. He felt deep gratitude for her courage and consistency, which had brought them to this moment. As the day waned, Maya prepared dinner, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and steamed vegetables. Leo ate with enthusiasm, occasionally looking up at his father and then back at Maya. The small glances and interactions were rich with meaning, each one a bridge being rebuilt between father and son. Richard participated quietly, careful not to disrupt the routine, yet fully aware of the significance of these ordinary moments. After dinner, they gathered in the living room. Maya read a story while Leo leaned against her, absorbed in the tale. Richard sat nearby, listening to the soft inflections in her voice, the clear laughter of his son, and the occasional whispered words exchanged between them. He realized that these small rituals, reading, guiding, encouraging, were the true markers of progress, far more important than any material provision or authoritative command. Finally, bedtime arrived. Maya guided Leo through brushing his teeth, washing his face, and changing into pajamas. She tucked him into bed, humming softly. Leo's breathing slowed, his eyes heavy but calm. Richard lingered near the doorway, feeling the weight of his emotions. He reflected on the past months, the anger, the fear, the mistakes, and allowed himself to feel a sense of hope he had long thought impossible. "Maya," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, I don't know how to thank you for everything." She looked up at him, calm and steady. "You don't need to thank me," she said softly. "Just keep showing up for him. That's what matters most." Richard nodded, swallowing hard. He watched Leo settle under the blanket, the small rise and fall of his chest a symbol of trust regained. He realized that wealth and authority had never been enough. The healing of his son's heart had come from patience, care, and the quiet courage of a woman who refused to leave his son's side. As he turned to leave the nursery, he whispered to himself, "We're getting there, together." Maya smiled faintly, adjusting the blanket around Leo. The boy stirred slightly, a tentative smile on his face. Richard felt a surge of emotion, understanding that trust, healing, and love were taking root in their fragile, recovering family. He stepped back into the hallway, heart swelling with hope and gratitude, knowing that the foundation Maya had helped build, trust, patience, and small victories, was strong enough to carry them through the challenges ahead. For the first time since his wife's death, Richard felt that they could truly begin to reclaim their lives. The Langston estate was unusually quiet that morning, the kind of stillness that seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Richard Langston sat in the sunroom, his coffee long forgotten, eyes fixed on the nursery monitor. Leo was awake, sitting on the floor with a colorful pile of blocks and a few picture books scattered around him. Maya William knelt beside him, her hands guiding his small fingers as he carefully placed a block atop a tower that was already precariously high. Richard felt a tightening in his chest. He had seen progress, yes, but today felt different. There was an energy in the room, a subtle shift in the air, that made him sense something significant was about to happen. "Careful, Leo. Steady." "Yes," Maya whispered softly. Leo's lips curved into a small, proud smile as the block held its place. Richard watched, leaning forward slightly, noting the boy's concentration and the trust he placed in Maya. This trust had been months in the making, and Richard felt a pang of humility, realizing how much he had underestimated both Maya and his son's resilience. After breakfast, Maya suggested they explore the garden maze, a winding path of hedges that had always fascinated Leo. Richard followed silently, letting Maya lead, observing the dynamic between caregiver and child. Leo ran ahead at first, darting between the hedges, then paused and looked back, seeking reassurance. Maya knelt, extending a hand. "Come on, Leo. Let's explore together." The boy took her hand, his small fingers curling around hers, and they continued through the maze. Richard felt a quiet awe at the simplicity of the interaction, the trust, the guidance, the subtle balance between freedom and safety. Halfway through the maze, Leo stopped abruptly, eyes wide. A small butterfly had landed on a flower near his feet. Maya crouched beside him, whispering gently, "Do you see it? Can you watch its wings?" Leo's eyes followed the delicate movements, and after a long moment, he whispered, "Pretty." Maya smiled, softly praising him. Richard's chest tightened. He realized that these small observations, these fleeting moments of wonder, were signs of his son reclaiming his childhood. Back inside, Maya led Leo to a small arts and crafts table. She spread crayons and paper across the surface and encouraged him to draw freely. Leo hesitated at first, uncertain, but Maya's calm presence reassured him. He began to draw lines at first, then shapes, and finally a recognizable figure. "That's you and Mommy," he whispered, pointing to the figure with a soft voice. Maya smiled, careful not to push, but softly encouraged him to talk more about his mother. Richard felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. Hearing Leo speak, even in small fragments, about the mother he had lost, brought a mixture of pride, sorrow, and hope. Midday brought an unexpected challenge. Leo grew restless, wandering toward the edge of the playroom where the furniture created potential hazards. Maya followed, voice calm but firm. "Leo, let's play over here instead. We can make a new tower." He hesitated, then turned back toward her guidance. Richard watched intently, noting how Leo's confidence was growing, yet how much he still relied on Maya's steady presence. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that trust was built through consistency and safety, not simply through words or commands. After lunch, Maya prepared a light meal while Richard assisted quietly. Leo ate with enthusiasm, occasionally looking up at his father, then back at Maya. The small glances, the subtle gestures of recognition, carried immense significance. Each moment was a building block in the boy's slow reclamation of trust and comfort. Richard marveled at the interplay, at how these ordinary actions, eating, playing, observing, had become milestones of healing. In the afternoon, Maya suggested a quiet reading session. She chose a story with vivid illustrations and animated characters. Leo leaned against her, listening intently, responding to her questions with short sentences. "What's the fox doing, Leo?" she asked. "Running," he answered softly, then added, "Fast." The clarity and confidence in his voice made Richard swallow hard. He realized he had been absent for so much of his son's growth, and yet now, with Maya's guidance, Leo was beginning to speak, to express himself, to feel safe. As the day drew to a close, Maya guided Leo through a simple music activity, tapping rhythms on small percussion instruments. Leo followed along, his small hands striking the drum in time with Maya's soft encouragements. Laughter erupted, clear and unrestrained, echoing through the rooms. Richard felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of relief, pride, and awe. This laughter was more than joy, it was proof of progress, a signal that months of fear and isolation were slowly being replaced with trust and confidence. Evening fell, and Maya guided Leo through his bedtime routine. He brushed his teeth without complaint, changed into pajamas, and settled into bed with a small stuffed animal clutched tightly in his hands. Maya hummed softly as she tucked him in, smoothing the blanket and ensuring he was comfortable. Richard lingered near the doorway, watching, feeling a deep gratitude that words could not express. "Maya," he whispered softly, voice thick with emotion, I can't thank you enough. For him, for everything." Maya glanced at him, calm and steady. "You don't need to thank me," she said quietly. "You've been showing up too. That matters." He's learning to trust, to speak, to laugh. That's the real victory. Richard nodded, swallowing hard. He thought of the months he had spent blinded by grief and fear, the nights of frustration and anger, and the moments when he had misjudged Maya's intentions. He realized now that healing was not about control or authority. It was about presence, patience, and compassion. Maya had demonstrated all of these, and the transformation in Leo was living proof of her dedication. Before leaving the room, Richard knelt beside his son. "Leo," he whispered, "I'm proud of you. I'm here, and I'll stay. Leo's eyes flicked open, a small smile breaking across his face. The boy reached out a tiny hand, touching his father's. Richard felt an ache of emotion, a mix of love, pride, and hope that was almost overwhelming. This simple gesture, so small yet profound, marked a turning point, a bridge of trust beginning to solidify between father and son. Maya stood quietly by, adjusting the blanket and watching the interaction with a faint, approving smile. Richard realized that the healing of his son's heart was also healing his own. The laughter, the words, the small victories, all orchestrated through patience, guidance, and unwavering presence, were restoring a family that had been fractured by loss and fear. As night settled over the estate, Richard stepped back, heart swelling with gratitude and hope. Leo slept peacefully, Maya's gentle presence nearby, and the house was filled not with the heavy silence of grief but with trust, laughter, and the quiet assurance that healing was underway. Richard knew the journey ahead would still be filled with challenges, but he also knew that with patience, love, and the courage to stay, they could face whatever came next. He whispered softly to himself, "We're moving forward. Together." The gentle rise and fall of Leo's chest, the quiet strength of Maya beside him, and the faint smiles exchanged in these small victories told him that even after darkness, light could return. And for the first time in months, Richard Langston allowed himself to believe that joy, laughter, and family could truly be reclaimed. The Langston estate woke to a gray sky, clouds heavy with the promise of rain. Richard Langston sat in the sunroom, eyes fixed on the nursery monitor, a mug of coffee growing cold in his hands. Leo was already awake, moving about the room with a restless energy that both thrilled and unsettled Richard. The boy's recovery had been steady, but mornings like this reminded him that progress was never perfectly linear. Maya William knelt beside Leo, her hands lightly resting on his shoulders. "Easy, Leo. Slow steps," she whispered, her voice calm and soothing. Leo's small hands fidgeted with his blanket as he glanced toward the door, as if weighing some invisible option. Richard could sense the tension in the room, a residue of the fears that had dominated Leo's world for months. Suddenly, the boy darted toward the corner of the room, where a low cabinet stood. Maya's eyes widened slightly, but she remained composed. "Leo, stop. Look at me," she said, stepping in front of him. Leo hesitated, then tried to push past her. Maya placed her hands gently on his small arms, guiding him back to the center of the room. "I'm right here, Leo. You're safe," she reassured him. The boy's breath came in rapid little gasps, his blue eyes wide with apprehension. Richard rose and crossed the room, heart pounding. He remembered all too well the night when fear and misunderstanding had driven him to anger. The night he had misjudged Maya and almost caused harm. His jaw tightened, and he spoke softly but firmly. "Leo, it's okay. You don't have to be afraid. We're all here with you." Leo's body trembled slightly, and Maya rubbed his back, whispering encouragements. The small gestures, repeated over weeks, had slowly created a bridge of trust. Richard felt gratitude swelling in his chest. He realized how much courage it took for Maya to remain patient and calm in moments of uncertainty, guiding his son without force, without reprimand. After a few tense minutes, Leo's trembling subsided. He allowed Maya to take his hand, and together they returned to the activity rug, where blocks and picture books awaited. Richard knelt nearby, observing. The boy's small smile appeared as he stacked blocks, and Maya softly praised each careful placement. "See? You can do this, Leo. You're doing great." Leo beamed at her words, a subtle glow of pride spreading across his face. Breakfast followed, simple and carefully prepared by Maya. Scrambled eggs with cheese, toast cut into manageable pieces, and a small bowl of strawberries. Leo ate with enthusiasm, occasionally glancing at Richard, seeking reassurance. Each interaction was measured, careful, and yet full of small victories. The boy's confidence was increasing, and Richard watched as he navigated not only the food but the nuances of attention and patience, learning to respond to encouragement without anxiety. After breakfast, Maya suggested a walk through the estate garden. Richard followed silently, noting the small details of Leo's exploration. The boy stopped frequently, examining flowers, stones, and insects, each time guided gently by Maya's soft commentary. "Look at the ladybug, Leo. Isn't it amazing? She pointed to its tiny wings, and Leo bent closer, whispering, "Pretty." Maya smiled, praising him for noticing. Richard's heart swelled. These moments, seemingly small, were monumental in the boy's healing. Mid-morning brought an unexpected challenge. Leo spotted a small fountain near the edge of the garden and ran toward it. Maya followed, her voice calm but firm. "Leo, wait. Step carefully. I'm right here." He paused, glancing at her, then proceeded slowly, hand in hers. Richard watched, the weight of emotion pressing on him. Each instance of potential danger was now a teaching moment, an opportunity to reinforce trust, safety, and independence. Back inside, Maya set up a creative activity. Colored pencils, paper, and small puzzle pieces were spread across the floor. Leo began with hesitant lines but quickly grew bolder, forming shapes and even simple figures. "That's you and Mommy," he whispered, pointing to a drawing. Maya smiled, careful not to push him, but encouraging conversation about the picture. Richard's throat tightened. Hearing his son speak, even in fragments, about his mother brought pride, sadness, and hope all at once. The afternoon was quieter. Maya guided Leo through a short story session, giving distinct voices to each character, encouraging the boy to answer questions. "What does the fox say?" she asked. "Run," he whispered, then added, "Fast." His voice was soft but confident, and Richard felt a rush of pride. Each word, each response, was a tangible sign of healing, a victory over the months of fear and silence that had dominated their lives. Evening approached, and Maya prepared a light dinner: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and steamed vegetables. Leo ate with enthusiasm, occasionally looking up at his father and back at Maya. The quiet glances, the tentative smiles, were rich with meaning. Each one marked another step in rebuilding the trust and connection that had been shattered by grief and fear. Richard assisted quietly, careful to participate without disrupting the routine, and he noticed the subtle bonds forming with each action. After dinner, they moved to the living room for a final activity before bed. Maya read a story while Leo leaned against her, absorbed in the narrative. Richard sat nearby, marveling at the progress. The boy who had once recoiled from human contact was now laughing, engaging, and responding with curiosity. Maya's gentle guidance had created a safe space where trust could flourish, and Richard felt a deep, overwhelming gratitude. Bedtime arrived. Maya guided Leo through brushing his teeth, washing his face, and changing into pajamas. She tucked him into bed, humming softly. Leo's breathing gradually evened, and Richard watched the peaceful rise and fall of his chest. For the first time in months, the house was filled not with tension or fear, but with calm, trust, and the beginnings of genuine joy. Richard stepped closer, voice hushed. "Maya, thank you. For everything." For him, she looked up, calm and composed. "You've been here too, Richard. Observing, learning, showing up. That matters. He's learning to trust, to feel safe, to speak. Those are victories worth more than anything else." Richard nodded, swallowing hard. He reflected on the past, the anger, the fear, the misjudgments, and realized that wealth and authority had never been enough to heal his son. It was presence, patience, and unwavering care that had restored this fragile trust. Maya had been the guide, the anchor, and the quiet force that allowed Leo to begin reclaiming his world. Leo stirred slightly, a small hand brushing the edge of the blanket. Richard felt a surge of emotion. This simple gesture, so small yet so meaningful, marked the continued rebuilding of trust between father and son. Maya straightened the blanket, a faint approving smile on her lips. Richard realized that healing was occurring not only in Leo but within himself. The laughter, words, and small victories were restoring a family that had once seemed fractured beyond repair. As the night settled over the estate, Richard stepped back into the hallway, heart swelling with gratitude, hope, and resolve. Leo slept peacefully, Maya nearby, and the house was no longer heavy with grief but filled with trust, love, and the promise of brighter days ahead. Richard whispered softly to himself, "We will get through this, together." He knew that the road ahead would still be filled with challenges, but he also knew that with patience, guidance, and love, they could face them, and that joy and laughter would continue to grow in their home. The Langston estate was bathed in soft morning light, the kind that made the polished floors glow and lent warmth to every corner of the spacious rooms. Richard Langston stood quietly in the sunroom, coffee long forgotten, eyes fixed on the nursery monitor. Leo was awake, sitting cross-legged on the rug with a small pile of blocks and a stack of picture books. Maya William knelt beside him, guiding his small hands with gentle encouragement as he carefully placed one block atop another. Each movement seemed deliberate, thoughtful, a far cry from the anxious, withdrawn gestures of weeks ago. "Careful, Leo, nice and steady," Maya whispered. "That's it, perfect." Leo's small lips curved into a tentative smile as the block balanced. He looked up at Maya, eyes sparkling, and let out a soft, genuine laugh. Richard felt his chest tighten. This was no small victory. It was a breakthrough. The boy who had once recoiled from touch, who had hidden from the world behind silence and fear, was now smiling, engaging, and beginning to feel safe again. After breakfast, Maya suggested a walk in the garden. Leo ran ahead, exploring freely, but still occasionally checking back with her. Maya followed, soft voice guiding, gentle hands ready if needed. "See the flowers, Leo? Can you smell them? Isn't that amazing?" Leo bent down, inhaling the scent and whispering, "Pretty." Maya smiled, praising him. Richard followed, observing quietly, overwhelmed by both pride and a twinge of guilt. He had been absent during so many months of Leo's withdrawal, unable to see the small miracles of trust and curiosity as they unfolded. Now, he realized the depth of Maya's work, the patience, the consistency, and the unwavering presence that had allowed his son to heal. Mid-morning brought a challenge. Leo spotted a small fountain at the edge of the garden and ran toward it. Maya followed calmly, calling his name. "Leo, slow down, I'm right here." The boy paused, hesitated, then allowed her to guide him safely. Richard watched, marveling at how much progress Leo had made. The boy had learned to listen, to pause, and to trust Maya's presence. Every small success reinforced confidence and the slow rebuilding of trust. Back inside, Maya set up an arts and crafts activity. Colored pencils, paper, and stickers were spread across the floor. Leo began drawing, at first hesitant lines and shapes, then more defined figures. "That's you and Mommy," he whispered, pointing to a sketch of two figures. Maya smiled, not pushing, but encouraging him gently to talk about the picture. Richard's throat tightened. Hearing his son speak about his mother, even softly, filled him with pride and a bittersweet sense of nostalgia. As the afternoon progressed, Maya guided Leo through a story session. She read aloud, changing voices for each character, encouraging him to respond to simple questions. "What does the fox say, Leo?" she asked. "Run. Fast," he whispered, a small smile forming. Richard felt a surge of emotion. Months of silence, withdrawal, and grief had given way to a boy who was speaking, responding, and beginning to reclaim his voice. Later, they took a short walk through the estate garden maze. Leo ran ahead, weaving between hedges, laughing, his small arms outstretched. Maya followed, calling his name gently and offering reassurance when he paused. Richard trailed behind, marveling at the trust and confidence his son now displayed. Every laugh, every careful step, every interaction was a testament to the steady work of patience, guidance, and love that Maya had provided. Evening arrived, and Maya prepared dinner while Richard assisted quietly. Leo ate with enthusiasm, occasionally looking up at his father and back at Maya. The subtle glances and smiles shared in these ordinary moments were laden with meaning. Richard understood that the rebuilding of trust and connection between father and son was taking place not in grand gestures, but in these small, deliberate interactions. After dinner, they moved to the living room for a final activity before bed. Maya read a story while Leo leaned against her, absorbed and engaged. Richard sat nearby, watching as the boy laughed, responded, and interacted with both Maya and his father. It was a quiet moment, but profoundly significant. The boy who had once recoiled from human contact now participated actively, expressing curiosity, emotion, and joy. Finally, bedtime arrived. Maya guided Leo through brushing his teeth, washing his face, and changing into pajamas. She tucked him into bed, humming softly. His breathing gradually evened, and his small hands rested calmly on the blanket. Richard lingered near the doorway, heart full, observing the peaceful scene. The house, once heavy with grief and silence, now resonated with trust, comfort, and subtle joy. Richard approached quietly, kneeling beside Leo. "Leo, I'm proud of you. You've done so well today." Leo stirred slightly, turning his face toward him, and for the first time in months, Richard saw a full, genuine smile spread across his son's face. It was not hesitant, tentative, or partial. It was complete, radiant, and filled with warmth. The sight brought tears to Richard's eyes, a mixture of relief, pride, and gratitude. Maya adjusted the blanket around Leo and looked at Richard with a faint smile. "He's learning," she said softly. "Learning to trust, to express himself, and to feel joy again. That's the most important thing." Richard nodded, swallowing hard. He reflected on the months of struggle, the nights of fear, the moments of anger, the misunderstandings, and his own mistakes. He realized now that true healing did not come from authority, wealth, or control, but from presence, patience, and unwavering care. Maya had been the anchor, the constant in a world that had once seemed chaotic and dangerous for his son. Leo stirred slightly, reaching a tiny hand toward his father. Richard took it gently, holding it and feeling a rush of emotion. That small gesture symbolized so much. Trust rebuilt, fear dissipated, and the fragile bonds of family strengthened. The boy's full smile and laughter were proof that healing, though slow, was happening. As the night settled over the estate, Richard stepped quietly into the hallway, heart swelling with gratitude and hope. Leo slept peacefully, Maya nearby, and the house was no longer haunted by loss but filled with trust, laughter, and the beginnings of a renewed family. Richard whispered softly to himself, "We are moving forward, together." He understood that the journey ahead would still bring challenges, but with patience, guidance, and love, they could face them, and joy, laughter, and connection would continue to grow within their home. The Langston estate was quiet that morning, the kind of stillness that felt like it could stretch on forever. Richard Langston stood in the study, coffee untouched on the desk, eyes fixed on the nursery monitor. Leo was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor with his blocks and a few picture books. Maya William knelt beside him, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders, guiding his movements with gentle precision. The boy's focus was unwavering, his small hands moving with care and intent. Richard felt a surge of pride, realizing that the months of consistent guidance and patience had finally taken root. "Careful, Leo. Steady now," Maya whispered. "That's it. Perfect." "Oh." Leo's lips curved into a bright smile, and he let out a soft laugh. The sound was pure and unguarded, a far cry from the quiet whimpers and silence of the weeks following his mother's death. Richard felt his chest tighten, overcome with emotion. This small moment, seemingly ordinary, symbolized the progress that had been months in the making. Maya had not only guided Leo through recovery, but had created an environment in which he felt safe to explore, learn, and express himself. After breakfast, Maya suggested a walk through the garden. Leo ran ahead, exploring with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Maya followed closely, speaking in calm, encouraging tones. "Look at the flowers, Leo. Can you see the colors? Isn't that amazing?" The boy bent down to examine a small bloom, whispering, "Pretty." Maya smiled, praising him. Richard walked behind them, silently observing. Each interaction was a step toward rebuilding the trust and security that had been shattered after his wife's death. He reflected on his own absence in the early months, how he had relied on authority and structure instead of patience and presence. Now, he saw how healing was taking place through small, deliberate moments. Mid-morning brought a minor challenge. Leo spotted the edge of the garden pond and darted toward it. Maya followed calmly, calling his name softly. "Leo, stop. I'm right here." He paused, glancing at her, and allowed her to take his hand. Together, They approached the pond safely. Richard watched intently, noting how each small incident reinforced trust. The boy's confidence was growing, but he still relied on Maya's guidance to navigate unfamiliar situations. The balance between independence and supervision was delicate, and Maya handled it with skill and patience. Back inside, Maya set up a creative activity. Colored pencils, paper, and stickers were spread across the rug. Leo began to draw, starting with hesitant lines that soon evolved into recognizable shapes: a small house, a tree, even a figure he labeled as Mommy. Maya praised each effort, gently encouraging him to talk about his drawings. Richard's throat tightened as he listened to Leo speak softly about his mother. The words were fragments, but they carried the weight of memory, trust, and a slowly returning sense of security. In the afternoon, Maya suggested a storytelling session. Leo sat attentively as she read aloud, using different voices for each character. She paused occasionally to ask questions, prompting him to respond. "What does the fox say, Leo?" she asked. "Run. Fast," he replied, his voice soft but confident. Richard watched from nearby, heart swelling with pride. The boy who had once recoiled from touch and avoided speech was now expressing himself clearly, engaging with the story, and participating in conversation. Later, Maya led Leo to a simple obstacle course set up in the living room. Cushions, small tables, and soft toys formed a path for him to navigate. She guided him gently, praising each successful step, encouraging him to try again when he stumbled. Leo laughed, a sound full of joy and accomplishment. Richard marveled at the transformation. These activities were more than play, they were teaching moments, reinforcing coordination, confidence, and trust. Each success, each small victory, was a step toward reclaiming the child's independence and self-assurance. Richard found himself reflecting on the weeks that had passed. He remembered the night of his rage, the hospital visit, and the moments when he had misjudged Maya's intentions. He thought of the frustration, fear, and guilt he had carried. Now, he understood that true healing came not from wealth or authority, but from consistency, presence, and compassion. Maya had been the steady force guiding his son through fear and grief, and the progress he saw now was living proof of her dedication. As evening approached, Maya prepared a light dinner: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and steamed vegetables. Leo ate with enthusiasm, occasionally glancing at Richard and back at Maya. Each interaction carried subtle meaning, small gestures that signified trust, recognition, and bonding. Richard quietly assisted, careful not to disrupt the established routine. He marveled at the simplicity of the moment and the profound impact it had on their family's healing. After dinner, they moved to the living room for a final activity before bedtime. Maya read another story, her voice animated and gentle. Leo listened intently, occasionally answering questions or repeating phrases. Richard watched silently, overwhelmed by the progress. The boy who had once hidden from the world was now engaging, laughing, and beginning to trust again. Maya's guidance had created a safe space, a bridge between fear and confidence. Bedtime arrived, and Maya guided Leo through his routine, brushing teeth, washing his face, and changing into pajamas. She tucked him in, humming softly. His breathing slowed, his small hands resting comfortably on the blanket. Richard lingered near the doorway, feeling the weight of his emotions. The house, once heavy with grief, now carried warmth, trust, and the beginnings of genuine joy. Richard stepped closer, voice low and full of feeling. "Maya, thank you for everything." For him, Maya looked at him, calm and steady. "You've been here too, Richard," she said softly. "Observing, learning, showing up, that matters. He's learning to trust, to speak, and to feel safe. That's the most important thing." "And is..." Richard nodded, swallowing hard. He reflected on his own mistakes, the moments of anger and misunderstanding. He understood now that healing was not a matter of control or discipline, but of presence, patience, and unwavering care. Maya had been the anchor for his son, the guiding force that allowed trust and confidence to grow. Leo stirred slightly, reaching a tiny hand toward Richard. Richard held it gently, feeling a surge of emotion. The gesture, so small yet profound, symbolized trust rebuilt, fear dissipated, and bonds strengthened. The boy's full smile, clear laughter, and growing confidence were proof that the family's healing was well underway. As night settled over the estate, Richard stepped back into the hallway, heart swelling with hope and gratitude. Leo slept peacefully, Maya nearby, and the home was no longer haunted by silence or fear but filled with trust, joy, and the promise of continued recovery. Richard whispered softly, "We are moving forward, together." He understood that the road ahead would still bring challenges, but with patience, love, and guidance, they could meet them, and joy, laughter, and family would continue to flourish. The Langston estate awoke to the soft hum of a spring morning, the sunlight spilling through the tall windows and bathing the nursery in a warm, golden glow. Richard Langston stood quietly in the sunroom, coffee untouched on the desk, eyes fixed on the monitor that displayed the nursery. Leo was already awake, seated cross-legged on the floor, blocks and picture books strewn around him. Maya William knelt beside him, her hands lightly resting on his shoulders, guiding his small fingers as he carefully placed a block atop a towering structure. The concentration on his young face was remarkable, a stark contrast to the fear and hesitancy that had marked the boy's early days after his mother's death. "Steady, careful, Leo. Perfect," Maya whispered. Leo's lips curved into a bright, unguarded smile, and he let out a soft laugh. Richard's chest tightened. This laugh, pure and unrestrained, was a sign that months of patience and guidance were bearing fruit. The boy who had once recoiled from touch and withdrawn into silence was now engaging with the world around him, trusting in the care and presence of Maya. Richard felt both awe and humility at the sight. After breakfast, Maya suggested a walk in the garden. Leo ran ahead, exploring with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Maya followed, keeping her voice low and encouraging. "Look at the flowers, Leo. Can you see the colors? Aren't they beautiful?" Leo crouched, inspecting a small bloom. "Pretty," he whispered. Maya smiled, praising him for noticing. Richard followed silently, observing the interplay. Each small interaction, each moment of careful guidance, was a step in rebuilding trust and confidence. He reflected on the months of absence, grief, and misunderstanding, realizing that true healing was occurring through patience, empathy, and unwavering presence. Mid-morning brought a small challenge. Leo spotted the edge of the garden pond and darted toward it. Maya's voice remained calm but firm. "Leo, wait. I'm right here." The boy paused, glanced at her, and took her hand. Together, they approached the pond safely. Richard marveled at how far his son had come. He had learned to listen, to respond to guidance, and to trust that Maya's presence meant safety. Each successful step reinforced his confidence and strengthened the bond between child and caregiver. Back inside, Maya set up a creative activity. Crayons, paper, and small puzzle pieces were spread across the floor. Leo began drawing, at first tentative lines that soon developed into recognizable shapes: a tree, a small house, even a figure he labeled Mommy. Maya praised his efforts, gently encouraging him to talk about the picture. Richard's throat tightened as he listened. The boy's ability to speak about his mother, even in fragments, was a milestone, a subtle yet powerful triumph over grief and fear. After the activity, Maya led Leo through a reading session. She read aloud with distinct voices for each character, occasionally pausing to ask questions. "What does the fox say, Leo?" she asked. "Run. Fast," he whispered, a small smile appearing. Richard felt a surge of pride. The boy who had once recoiled from human contact was now speaking, responding, and engaging actively. Each word, each expression of curiosity or joy, was a victory proof that healing was unfolding, slowly but steadily. As the afternoon progressed, Maya guided Leo through a gentle obstacle course in the living room. Cushions, small tables, and soft toys formed a path for him to navigate. She guided him with careful encouragement, praising each successful movement and offering reassurance when he stumbled. Leo laughed freely, exhilarated by his own accomplishments. Richard watched, his heart swelling with awe. He realized that these simple activities, structured, playful, and guided with care, were rebuilding his son's confidence, teaching him both independence and trust. Richard's thoughts turned to the months that had passed. He remembered the night of his anger, the hospital visits, the moments when he had misjudged Maya's intentions. He reflected on his own absence, how he had relied on control and authority instead of presence and empathy. Now, he understood that true healing required patience, consistency, and a steady, nurturing hand. Maya had provided all of these, and Leo's progress was living proof of her dedication. Evening approached, and Maya prepared a light dinner: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and steamed vegetables. Leo ate with enthusiasm, occasionally glancing at Richard and back at Maya. These small interactions, subtle as they were, symbolized trust, recognition, and the slow but steady rebuilding of the father-son relationship. Richard quietly assisted, careful to participate without disrupting the routine, observing how these ordinary actions carried extraordinary significance in the boy's recovery. After dinner, they gathered in the living room. Maya read a story while Leo leaned against her, fully absorbed. Richard sat nearby, watching as the boy laughed, answered questions, and engaged with both Maya and his father. The contrast between the withdrawn child of months ago and the boy now expressing curiosity and joy was striking. Maya's guidance had created a safe space, allowing trust and confidence to flourish. Bedtime arrived, and Maya led Leo through his nightly routine. He brushed his teeth, washed his face, and changed into pajamas. She tucked him into bed, humming softly. His breathing slowed, his small hands resting comfortably on the blanket. Richard lingered near the doorway, feeling a mixture of gratitude, awe, and hope. The house, once heavy with grief and silence, now carried warmth, trust, and the beginnings of genuine joy. Richard approached quietly, kneeling beside his son. "Leo, I'm proud of you. You've done so well today." Leo stirred slightly, turning toward him, and for the first time in months, Richard saw a full, radiant smile on his son's face. It was not tentative, hesitant, or partial. It was complete, glowing with warmth and trust. The sight brought tears to Richard's eyes, a mixture of pride, relief, and gratitude. Maya adjusted the blanket around Leo and looked at Richard, her expression calm but filled with quiet pride. "He's learning to trust, to express himself, and to feel joy again," she said softly. "That's the most important thing." Richard nodded, swallowing hard. He reflected on the months of struggle, the anger, fear, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. He realized that wealth and authority had never been enough to heal his son. Healing had come from patience, presence, and unwavering care. Maya had been the anchor, the steady force that allowed Leo to reclaim his world. Leo stirred slightly, reaching a tiny hand toward Richard. Richard took it gently, feeling a surge of emotion. This small gesture symbolized trust rebuilt, fear dissipated, and bonds strengthened. The boy's full smile, laughter, and confidence were proof that the family's fragile but steady healing was real and ongoing. As night settled over the estate, Richard stepped quietly into the hallway, heart swelling with hope and gratitude. Leo slept peacefully, Maya nearby, and the house was no longer haunted by grief and silence. Instead, it was filled with trust, joy, and the promise of continued growth. Richard whispered softly to himself, "We are moving forward, together." He knew that the days ahead would still bring challenges, but with patience, love, and guidance, they could meet them, and joy and laughter would continue to flourish within their home. The Langston estate greeted the morning with a soft haze of sunlight filtering through the tall windows. Richard Langston stood in the study, coffee untouched, eyes fixed on the nursery monitor. Leo was already awake, seated on the floor with blocks and picture books spread around him. Maya William knelt beside him, her hands lightly guiding his small fingers as he carefully placed each block atop the growing tower. The boy's concentration was intense, his movements deliberate and thoughtful. Richard felt a surge of pride and awe. The months of patience, guidance, and unwavering care were manifesting in tangible progress. "Careful, Leo. Steady. That's it," Maya whispered softly. Leo's lips curved into a bright smile, and he let out a soft laugh that echoed around the room. Richard's chest tightened. Each small victory seemed monumental. The boy who had once recoiled from touch, who had hidden from the world in silence and fear, was now engaging with his environment, trusting the steady guidance of Maya. The transformation was gradual but undeniable, and Richard felt both awe and humility at the sight. After breakfast, Maya suggested a walk in the garden. Leo ran ahead, exploring the paths lined with flowers and hedges. Maya followed, her voice calm and encouraging. "Look at the flowers, Leo. Can you see the colors? Beautiful, aren't they?" Leo bent down to smell a bloom and whispered, "Pretty." Maya smiled, praising his observation. Richard trailed behind, observing the subtle interactions. Each step, each gentle word, was part of rebuilding trust and confidence. He reflected on his own absence during the early months, realizing that true healing required presence, patience, and empathy, not authority or control. Mid-morning presented a minor challenge. Leo spotted the edge of the garden pond and darted toward it. Maya's voice remained calm but firm. "Leo, wait, I'm right here." He paused, glanced at her, and took her hand. Together, they approached the pond safely. Richard marveled at the progress. The boy had learned to pause, to listen, and to trust guidance. Each small success reinforced confidence and strengthened the bond between child and caregiver. Back inside, Maya set up a creative activity with crayons, paper, and puzzle pieces. Leo began drawing, starting with hesitant lines that gradually became more defined: shapes, a tree, a house, even a figure labeled "Mommy." Maya praised each effort, gently encouraging him to speak about his drawings. Richard's throat tightened as he listened. Hearing his son speak about his mother, even in fragments, marked a significant step in reclaiming his child's voice and confidence. Afterward, Maya led Leo through a storytelling session. She read aloud, giving each character a distinct voice, and occasionally asked questions to encourage interaction. "What is the fox doing, Leo?" she asked. "Running. Fast," he whispered, his face lighting up. Richard watched, feeling a surge of pride. The boy who had once hidden from human contact was now expressing curiosity, speaking clearly, and engaging actively. Each word, each expression of joy, was a testament to the gradual rebuilding of trust. As the afternoon progressed, Maya guided Leo through a gentle obstacle course in the living room. Cushions, small tables, and soft toys formed the path. She encouraged him to step carefully, praising every successful movement and offering reassurance when he stumbled. Leo laughed freely, exhilarated by his accomplishments. Richard felt awe and gratitude. These activities, simple yet intentional, were teaching him independence while reinforcing trust and confidence. Richard reflected on the past months. He remembered the night of his anger, the hospital visit, and his misjudgment of Maya's intentions. He thought of the months of grief and frustration, and the slow, steady progress that had followed. He understood now that healing did not come from authority or control, but from presence, patience, and consistent care. Maya had been the anchor in his son's turbulent world, and Leo's progress was living proof of her dedication. Evening approached, and Maya prepared dinner: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and steamed vegetables. Leo ate with enthusiasm, occasionally glancing at Richard and back at Maya. The subtle interactions, glances, smiles, small gestures were rich with meaning. Each marked another step in rebuilding the father-son bond. Richard assisted quietly, careful not to disrupt the routine, absorbing the significance of these ordinary moments. After dinner, they moved to the living room for a final activity before bed. Maya read a story while Leo leaned against her, fully absorbed. Richard watched silently as the boy laughed, responded to questions, and engaged with both Maya and himself. The contrast between the withdrawn child of weeks ago and the boy now expressing curiosity and joy was remarkable. Maya's patient guidance had created a safe space, allowing trust and confidence to flourish. Bedtime arrived, and Maya guided Leo through brushing his teeth, washing his face, and changing into pajamas. She tucked him into bed, humming softly. His breathing gradually evened, his hands resting comfortably on the blanket. Richard lingered near the doorway, feeling the weight of months of grief, fear, and guilt giving way to hope and gratitude. The house, once heavy with loss and silence, now radiated trust, warmth, and joy. Richard approached quietly, kneeling beside Leo. "Leo, I'm proud of you. Today, you did amazing," he whispered. The boy stirred slightly, turning to him with a radiant, full smile. It was genuine, unguarded, and full of warmth. Richard felt tears prick at his eyes. This small gesture symbolized trust rebuilt, fear dissipated, and family bonds strengthened. Maya adjusted the blanket around Leo and looked at Richard with a calm, approving smile. "He's learning to trust, to express himself, and to feel safe again," she said softly. "That's the most important victory." Richard nodded, swallowing hard. He reflected on the months of struggle, the nights of fear, anger, and misunderstanding, and realized that wealth and authority had never been enough to heal his son. Healing came from presence, patience, and unwavering care. Maya had been the guiding force, allowing Leo to reclaim his confidence, joy, and trust in the world. Leo stirred slightly, reaching a tiny hand toward Richard. Richard held it gently, feeling a surge of emotion. That simple gesture, so small yet profound, marked the rebuilding of trust between father and son. The boy's smile, laughter, and confidence were proof that the family's healing was progressing steadily, despite the lingering shadows of past grief. As night fell over the estate, Richard stepped back into the hallway, heart swelling with hope and gratitude. Leo slept peacefully, Maya nearby, and the home was no longer haunted by silence or fear. Instead, it was filled with trust, laughter, and the promise of continued growth. Richard whispered softly to himself, "We are moving forward, together." He understood that challenges would continue, but with patience, guidance, and love, they could meet them, and joy, laughter, and connection would flourish in their home. The morning sun spilled into the Langston estate, illuminating the nursery with a soft, golden light. Richard Langston stood quietly in the sunroom, coffee untouched, eyes fixed on the monitor. Leo was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor with blocks and picture books strewn around him. Maya William knelt beside him, her hands lightly guiding his small fingers as he carefully placed each block atop the growing tower. His concentration was intense, but there was a new energy in his movements, a sense of confidence that had been absent for months. "Steady, careful, Leo. Perfect," Maya whispered. Leo's lips curved into a bright, unguarded smile, and he let out a soft laugh. Richard felt his chest tighten. This was no ordinary morning. The boy who had once recoiled from touch and withdrawn into silence was now fully engaging with his surroundings, demonstrating both trust and joy. Maya's guidance had made this transformation possible, her patience and calm presence acting as a steady anchor in Leo's young life. After breakfast, Maya suggested they explore the garden. Leo ran ahead, curiosity evident in every step. Maya followed, gently guiding him and using soft, encouraging words. "Look at the flowers, Leo. Can you see all the colors? Aren't they beautiful?" Leo bent down, inhaling the scent of a small bloom. "Pretty," he whispered. Maya smiled, praising him. Richard observed from a distance, noting how Leo's curiosity and confidence had grown. Each moment of guidance and trust-building over the past weeks had transformed the boy's world, allowing him to reclaim pieces of his childhood. Mid-morning brought a minor challenge. Leo spotted the garden pond and ran toward it. Maya followed calmly. "Leo, wait. I'm right here," she called. He paused, glanced at her, and allowed her to take his hand. Together, they approached the pond safely. Richard marveled at the progress. The boy had learned to pause, to listen, and to trust guidance. Each successful step reinforced his confidence and strengthened the bond between child and caregiver. Back inside, Maya set up a creative activity. Crayons, paper, and puzzle pieces were spread across the rug. Leo began drawing, initially with hesitant lines, then developing into recognizable shapes, a tree, a house, and even a figure labeled Mommy. Maya praised each effort, gently encouraging him to talk about his drawings. Richard's throat tightened. Hearing his son speak about his mother, even in small fragments, was a profound step in reclaiming his voice and confidence. Afterward, Maya led Leo through a reading session. She read aloud with distinct voices for each character, pausing to ask questions. "What is the fox doing, Leo?" she asked. "Running, fast," he whispered, a small smile lighting up his face. Richard felt a surge of pride. The boy who had once hidden from human contact was now expressing curiosity, speaking clearly, and engaging actively. Each word, each expression of joy, was a victory. Proof that healing was taking place. The afternoon brought a new opportunity for growth. Maya set up an obstacle course in the living room using cushions, small tables, and soft toys. She encouraged Leo to navigate the course carefully, praising each successful movement and offering reassurance when he stumbled. Leo laughed freely, exhilarated by his accomplishments. Richard watched, marveling at the boy's increasing independence. These activities were more than play, they were exercises in confidence, trust, and self-assurance, laying the foundation for continued growth. Richard reflected on the months that had passed. He remembered the night of his rage, the hospital visit, and the moments when he had misjudged Maya's intentions. He thought of the weeks of fear and withdrawal that had followed, and of the slow, steady progress that had come after. He realized that wealth and authority had never been enough to heal his son. True healing required presence, patience, and unwavering care. Maya had been the anchor, and Leo's transformation was living proof of her dedication. Evening approached, and Maya prepared a light dinner: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and steamed vegetables. Leo ate with enthusiasm, occasionally looking up at Richard and back at Maya. Each glance, each subtle smile, carried immense meaning. They were symbols of trust, recognition, and the slowly rebuilding bond between father and son. Richard assisted quietly, careful not to disrupt the routine, fully aware of the extraordinary significance of these ordinary actions. After dinner, they gathered in the living room. Maya read a story while Leo leaned against her, fully absorbed. Richard sat nearby, watching as his son laughed, responded to questions, and engaged with both Maya and himself. The boy who had once recoiled from the world was now expressing curiosity, joy, and trust. Maya's guidance had created a safe space where confidence could flourish, and Richard felt a deep gratitude for her unwavering support. Bedtime arrived, and Maya guided Leo through his nightly routine, brushing teeth, washing face, and changing into pajamas. She tucked him into bed, humming softly. Leo's breathing slowed, his hands resting comfortably on the blanket. Richard lingered near the doorway, overwhelmed by gratitude and hope. The house, once heavy with grief, now radiated trust, warmth, and quiet joy. Richard stepped closer, kneeling beside his son. "Leo, I'm proud of you. Today, you were amazing," he whispered. The boy stirred slightly, turning toward him, a radiant, full smile spreading across his face. Richard felt tears prick at his eyes. This small gesture, so simple yet so profound, marked the rebuilding of trust, the dissipation of fear, and the strengthening of family bonds. Maya adjusted the blanket around Leo and looked at Richard, calm and approving. "He's learning to trust, to express himself, and to feel safe again," she said softly. "That's the most important victory." Richard nodded, swallowing hard. He thought of the months of struggle, the nights of anger, fear, and misunderstanding, and realized that wealth and authority had never been enough to heal his son. Healing had come from patience, guidance, and unwavering care. Maya had been the steady hand guiding Leo toward confidence, joy, and trust in the world. Leo stirred slightly, reaching a tiny hand toward Richard. He took it gently, feeling a surge of emotion. That small gesture symbolized trust rebuilt, fear dissipated, and family bonds strengthened. The boy's full smile, laughter, and newfound confidence were proof that their fragile but steady healing was progressing. As night settled over the estate, Richard stepped quietly into the hallway, heart swelling with hope and gratitude. Leo slept peacefully, Maya nearby, and the house was no longer heavy with grief or silence. Instead, it was filled with trust, joy, and the promise of continued growth. Richard whispered softly to himself, "We are moving forward. Together." He knew that challenges would continue, but with patience, guidance, and love, they could face them, and laughter, connection, and happiness would continue to grow in their home. The Langston estate greeted the morning with a gentle sunlight that spilled across the polished floors, illuminating the nursery in a warm, golden glow. Richard Langston sat in the sunroom, coffee cooling in his hands, eyes glued to the nursery monitor. Leo was already awake, seated on the floor with his blocks and a few picture books scattered around him. Maya William knelt beside him, her hands lightly guiding his small fingers as he carefully placed blocks atop a tall, wobbly tower. The boy's concentration was intense, but there was a new energy in his movements, a quiet confidence that had been absent for months. "Steady, Leo. Careful. Perfect," Maya whispered. Leo's lips curved into a genuine smile, and a soft laugh escaped him. Richard's chest tightened. Each small victory felt monumental. The boy who had once recoiled from touch, who had withdrawn from the world into silence and fear, was now engaging fully with his environment, trusting in Maya's steady presence. Richard felt both pride and humility at the transformation before him. After breakfast, Maya suggested a walk in the garden. Leo ran ahead, exploring with curiosity and joy, occasionally glancing back to ensure Maya was nearby. "Look at the flowers, Leo. Can you see all the colors?" Maya's voice was calm and encouraging. The boy crouched, examining a bloom. "Pretty," he whispered. Maya smiled and praised him. Richard trailed behind, silently observing, marveling at the small gestures of trust and connection that had been carefully cultivated over weeks. Mid-morning brought an unexpected challenge. Leo spotted the garden pond and dashed toward it. Maya's voice remained calm yet firm. "Leo, wait. I'm right here." The boy paused, glanced at her, and allowed her to take his hand. Together, they approached the pond safely. Richard felt a swell of gratitude. Each small incident had become an opportunity for teaching and reinforcement of trust. The boy had learned to pause, listen, and rely on guidance, a skill that had been painfully absent after his mother's death. Back inside, Maya set up a creative activity. Crayons, paper, and puzzle pieces were spread across the rug. Leo began drawing, at first tentative lines that evolved into recognizable shapes: a tree, a house, and even a figure labeled Mommy. Maya praised every effort, gently prompting him to discuss the picture. Richard's throat tightened. Hearing his son speak about his mother, even in fragments, was a profound sign of progress, a reclamation of voice and memory. Afterward, Maya led Leo through a reading session. She read aloud with animated voices for each character, pausing to ask questions and encourage responses. "What is the fox doing, Leo?" she asked. "Running, fast," he whispered, a small smile lighting his face. Richard's chest tightened with emotion. The boy who had once avoided interaction was now speaking, responding, and engaging. Each word, each expression of curiosity, was proof that healing was taking place. In the afternoon, Maya guided Leo through an obstacle course in the living room, composed of cushions, small tables, and soft toys. She encouraged him to step carefully, praising each successful movement and offering reassurance when he stumbled. Leo laughed freely, exhilarated by his accomplishments. Richard watched, overwhelmed with awe. These exercises were more than play, they were tools to build independence, trust, and self-assurance. Richard's mind wandered back over the months that had passed. He recalled the night of his anger, the hospital visit, and the misjudgments that had nearly broken the fragile trust between them. He reflected on the weeks of withdrawal, fear, and silence, and the slow, steady progress that had followed. He realized that wealth and authority alone could never have healed his son. True healing had come from patience, consistency, and unwavering care. Maya had been the anchor, the constant in Leo's turbulent world. Evening arrived, and Maya prepared dinner. Grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and steamed vegetables. Leo ate with enthusiasm, glancing at Richard and back at Maya. Each subtle interaction, the brief eye contact, the small smile, the gestures of recognition was significant. They marked steps toward rebuilding the father-son bond and nurturing trust. Richard assisted quietly, careful not to disrupt the established routine, realizing the extraordinary impact of these ordinary moments. After dinner, They gathered in the living room. Maya read a story while Leo leaned against her. Fully absorbed, Richard watched silently, noting the contrast between the withdrawn boy of months past and the curious, laughing child before him. Maya's patient guidance had created a safe space for confidence and trust to flourish. Richard felt profound gratitude for her unwavering support. Bedtime came, and Maya guided Leo through brushing his teeth, washing his face, and changing into pajamas. She tucked him in, humming softly. His breathing slowed, hands resting comfortably on the blanket. Richard lingered near the doorway, heart swelling with gratitude and hope. The house, once weighed down by grief and silence, now radiated trust, warmth, and the beginnings of genuine joy. Richard approached quietly, kneeling beside his son. "Leo, I'm proud of you. Today, you were amazing," he whispered. Leo stirred slightly, turning toward him, and for the first time in months, Richard saw a full, radiant smile spread across his face. Richard felt tears prick his eyes. That small gesture, so simple yet so profound, symbolized trust rebuilt, fear dissipated, and family bonds strengthened. Maya adjusted the blanket around Leo and looked at Richard with calm approval. "He's learning to trust, to express himself, and to feel safe again," she said softly. "That's the most important victory." Richard nodded, swallowing hard. He reflected on the months of struggle, the nights of fear, anger, and misunderstanding, and realized that wealth and authority alone could never have healed his son. True recovery had come from patience, guidance, and unwavering care. Maya had been the steady hand guiding Leo toward confidence, joy, and trust in the world. Leo stirred slightly, reaching a tiny hand toward Richard. Richard held it gently, feeling a surge of emotion. That small gesture symbolized trust rebuilt, fear dissipated, and the bonds of family strengthened. The boy's full smile, laughter, and confidence were proof that the family's fragile healing was well underway. As night fell over the estate, Richard stepped quietly into the hallway, heart swelling with hope and gratitude. Leo slept peacefully, Maya nearby, and the home was no longer haunted by silence or fear. Instead, it was filled with trust, joy, and the promise of continued growth. Richard whispered softly to himself, "We are moving forward, together." He knew the days ahead would still bring challenges, but with patience, guidance, and love, they could face them, and laughter, connection, and happiness would continue to flourish in their home. The Langston estate greeted the morning with a golden light that spilled through the tall windows, illuminating every corner of the nursery. Richard Langston stood quietly in the sunroom, coffee untouched in his hands, eyes fixed on the monitor. Leo was already awake, seated cross-legged on the floor with his blocks and picture books neatly arranged around him. Maya William knelt beside him, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders as she guided his small fingers in placing the final blocks atop a tall, carefully balanced tower. The boy's concentration was sharp, yet there was a new ease in his movements, a confidence that had been absent for months. "Steady, careful, Leo. Perfect," Maya whispered. Leo's lips curved into a full, radiant smile, and he let out a joyful laugh that echoed through the room. Richard felt his chest tighten. This was no ordinary morning. The boy who had once recoiled from touch, who had withdrawn from the world into silence and fear, was now fully engaging, trusting, and exploring. Maya's guidance had been steadfast, patient, and nurturing, creating the foundation for this transformation. Richard felt both awe and profound gratitude. After breakfast, Maya suggested a walk in the garden. Leo ran ahead, curiosity evident in every step. Maya followed, her voice soft and encouraging. "Look at the flowers, Leo. Can you see all the colors? Aren't they beautiful?" The boy crouched to inspect a bloom, whispering, "Pretty." Maya smiled and praised him for noticing. Richard walked behind them, silently observing. Every glance, every gentle gesture, every word of encouragement had contributed to the slow rebuilding of trust. He reflected on the months of absence, fear, and misjudgment, realizing that presence, patience, and consistency had been the true keys to his son's healing. Mid-morning brought a small test of patience. Leo spotted the garden pond and ran toward it, excitement pushing him forward. Maya's voice was calm but firm. "Leo, wait, I'm right here." He paused, looked at her, and allowed her to take his hand. Together, they approached the pond safely. Richard's heart swelled. Every challenge, every moment of potential danger, had become an opportunity for learning, trust building, and reinforcement of security. Back inside, Maya set up a creative activity. Crayons, paper, and small puzzle pieces were spread across the rug. Leo began drawing, first with hesitant lines that evolved into recognizable shapes: a tree, a house, and a figure labeled Mommy. Maya praised each effort, gently encouraging conversation about his drawings. Richard's throat tightened. Hearing his son speak, even in fragments, about his mother marked a profound reclaiming of voice, memory, and emotional confidence. In the afternoon, Maya guided Leo through a reading session. She read aloud, animating each character's voice, and paused to ask questions that encouraged responses. "What is the fox doing, Leo?" she asked. "Running. Fast," he whispered, a small smile lighting up his face. Richard felt pride and awe. The boy who had once recoiled from interaction was now engaging, expressing curiosity, and participating actively. Each word and expression was a victory, a tangible sign that the months of grief and fear were yielding to trust, confidence, and healing. Later, Maya guided Leo through a simple obstacle course in the living room. Cushions, small tables, and soft toys formed the path. She encouraged careful steps, praised every success, and offered reassurance when he stumbled. Leo laughed freely, exhilarated by his achievements. Richard watched, understanding that these seemingly small exercises were building independence, self-assurance, and trust lessons that would endure far beyond the confines of play. Richard's thoughts drifted to the months that had passed: the nights of anger, the hospital visit, the misjudgments, and the slow rebuilding of trust. He realized that wealth and authority alone could never have healed his son. Healing had come from presence, patience, and consistent care. Maya had been the constant, the steady anchor, allowing Leo to reclaim his confidence, joy, and sense of security. Evening fell, and Maya prepared a simple, nourishing dinner. Grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and steamed vegetables. Leo ate with enthusiasm, occasionally glancing at Richard and then back at Maya. Each subtle glance and gesture symbolized trust, recognition, and the strengthening of familial bonds. Richard assisted quietly, careful not to disrupt the rhythm, fully aware of the significance of these ordinary interactions in Leo's recovery. After dinner, they gathered in the living room. Maya read a story while Leo leaned against her, absorbed in the narrative. Richard sat nearby, watching as his son laughed, answered questions, and engaged with both Maya and himself. The boy who had once hidden from the world was now speaking, listening, laughing, and connecting. Maya's patient guidance had created a safe, nurturing space, allowing trust and confidence to flourish. Bedtime arrived, and Maya led Leo through his nightly routine. Brushing teeth, washing face, and changing into pajamas. She tucked him in, humming softly. His breathing slowed, hands resting comfortably on the blanket. Richard lingered in the doorway, heart full. The house, once heavy with grief and silence, now radiated trust, warmth, and joy. Richard knelt beside his son. "Leo, I'm proud of you. Today, you were amazing," he whispered. Leo stirred, turning toward him, and for the first time in months, offered a full, radiant smile. Richard's eyes welled with tears. That small gesture, so simple yet profound, symbolized trust rebuilt, fear dissipated, and family bonds strengthened. Maya adjusted the blanket around Leo and looked at Richard with a calm, approving smile. "He's learning to trust, to express himself, and to feel safe again," she said softly. "That's the most important victory." Richard nodded, swallowing hard. He reflected on the journey, the nights of anger, the moments of doubt, the slow, steady progress, and realized that authority and wealth alone could not heal. Healing required patience, guidance, and unwavering care. Maya had been the steady hand guiding Leo toward confidence, joy, and trust. Leo stirred slightly, reaching a tiny hand toward Richard. He held it gently, feeling a surge of emotion. That simple gesture symbolized trust rebuilt, fear dissipated, and the strengthening of family bonds. The boys' full smile, laughter, and confidence were proof that the fragile healing they had nurtured was now flourishing. As night settled over the estate, Richard stepped quietly into the hallway, heart swelling with hope and gratitude. Leo slept peacefully, Maya nearby, and the home was no longer heavy with grief or silence. Instead, it was filled with trust, joy, and the promise of continued growth. Richard whispered softly to himself, "We are moving forward, together." He knew that challenges would continue, but with patience, guidance, and love, they could face them, and laughter, connection, and happiness would continue to fill their home. The story of Leo, Maya, and Richard teaches us that true healing and growth come not from wealth, authority, or force, but from patience, presence, and unwavering care. It shows the transformative power of trust, empathy, and consistent support, especially in the face of fear, grief, and trauma. Small, everyday moments, gentle guidance, attentive listening, and encouragement can rebuild confidence, nurture emotional resilience, and restore broken bonds. Most importantly, it reminds us that love and understanding, when paired with steadfast dedication, can help even the most fragile hearts rediscover joy, hope, and connection.